Chapter 514. When Phantom Princess opened her mouth, Li Mu's hair stood on end. He covered her mouth and said, "Don't talk so much." Illusion Princess's mouth was covered by Li Mu, so she couldn't speak. She could only mutter, "Moo." The woman's muffled voice entered Zhou Yi's ears. She almost crushed the spirit conch in her hand. She said angrily, "What are you doing?" Lu Hanyan walked over and asked, "Your Majesty, what's wrong?" Zhou Yi handed the spirit conch to her. She gritted her teeth and said, "You have to control your husband." Hearing Lu Hanyan's voice coming from the spirit snail, Li Mu's heart was half at ease. In the past she was unruly, arrogant and willful, but after marrying him she slowly began to be reasonable. Li Mu explained the situation to her. After a while Lu Hanyan put down the spirit conch and said to the Empress, "Your Majesty, you've misunderstood him. There's nothing between him and the Empress of Thousand Fox Country. It's all a misunderstanding." Zhou Yi took back the spirit conch and turned her head. "What misunderstanding? As long as he doesn't betray the Great Zhou, he can be with whoever he wants. If you don't care, why should I care?" Lu Hanyan smiled and said, "No matter what, she's still the Empress of a country. As long as she's sincere about her husband, I don't care. It's just another sister in the family." Zhou Yi looked at Lu Hanyan. She felt that there was a hidden meaning in her words. In Thousand Fox Country, Illusion Princess's voice had recovered. She looked at Li Mu in shock and asked, "Zhou Yi and your wife are together?" Li Mu glanced at her and said, "Didn't you hear it?" Illusion Princess said in disbelief, "Why are they together? Won't they fight?" Li Mu said, "No, not only won't they fight, they're as close as sisters. You don't have to worry." Illusion Princess gritted her teeth and said, "Worry my ass." She had never expected that Zhou Xian would get together with Li Mu's wife after she left Luoyang. This made her jealous and hateful. All kinds of emotions mixed together. She returned to her palace. Hulu looked at her and said, "Your Majesty, the heavenly monarch wants you to see him." Illusion Princess left the palace and went to the highest cave residence in Thousand Fox Country. She said listlessly, "Father, what's the matter?" The myriad illusion lord sat cross-legged on a stone platform and said, "Li Mu is here?" Illusion Princess said, "Didn't you already know?" The 10,000 illusions god monarch pondered for a moment, then looked at her and asked, "What exactly are you planning?" Princess asked, "Heavenly what?" Heavenly monarch of myriad illusions said, "It's about your relationship with Li Mu." Huanji sighed and said, "What can I do? The Celestial Fox clan always pays their debts. He saved me, you and my brother time and time again. He made me the queen of Thousand Fox Kingdom and helped us deal with the Celestial Wolf clan. He even gave me so many experts. I can only repay such a great debt by marrying him." Heavenly monarch of myriad illusion reached out and a pink pill appeared in his hand. Illusion Princess looked at the pill and asked, "What's this?" Heavenly monarch of myriad illusion said, "Let him take this pill. No matter how strong his mind is, he will fall into the temptation of lust." Huanji didn't even look at the pill. She coldly snorted and said, "As a fox spirit, using this kind of thing is a disgrace. I will make him like me willingly and not use such low methods." Then she turned and walked out of the cave residence. Heavenly monarch of myriad illusion was about to put away the pill, but it flew out of the cave residence. The pink pill floated in Illusion Princess's hand and said, "Just in case." In the imperial palace of Thousand Fox Country, Li Mu looked at Hulu, who was making a bed for him, and said, "Go do your thing. I'll do it myself." The main thing was that she was kneeling on the bed with her buttocks sticking out and twisting around. Who could stand it? Even though Li Mu didn't have any other thoughts about her, he didn't want to see such a scene before going to bed at night. Hulu continued to kneel on the bed and said, "This is what Lord Illusion Princess told me. Just wait a little longer." She said while making the bed, "This used to be the Queen's palace. No one has lived here for a long time. Lord Illusion Princess said this place has the most space and has been keeping it for you." After Hulu finished making the bed, she left the room. Li Mu lay comfortably on the big, soft bed. All his fatigue had been relieved. After an unknown amount of time, the spirit snail in the storage space vibrated again. Li Mu picked it up and immediately said, "Your Majesty, listen to this subject." In the spirit snail, Zhou Yi said indifferently, "I know." Li Mu let out a sigh of relief and said, "This subject met Zhou Zhong here. Leave the matter of Xin country to him." Your Majesty can rest assured. The Empress didn't seem to be interested in this matter at all. She reminded Li Mu, be careful of that fox in Yao country. Don't do anything to let Han Yan down. After he left, it seemed that the relationship between the Empress and Lu Hanyan was developing quickly. Li Mu was relieved and said, Your Majesty, don't worry. This subject knows what to do. Before he finished speaking, the door was suddenly pushed open. Li Mu saw Illusion Princess walk in and immediately pulled up the blanket. He asked vigilantly, What are you doing? Illusion Princess glanced at him and said, Why are you so afraid? Do you think I will eat you? Li Mu sat up from the bed and revealed his naked upper body. He said in disdain, Why would a man like me be afraid of this? You should be the one who is afraid of me eating you. Illusion Princess snorted coldly, Then eat me. Li Mu realized that she couldn't be treated like a normal girl. He took off his pajamas and covered his body. He asked, Why are you here so late? It seemed like there were only 2 people in the room, but there were actually 3 of them. Ling Kong was still under his blanket, and Phantom Princess had come to his room in the middle of the night. If Li Mu hung up now, the Empress would probably think about it for the whole night. Anyways, he was not afraid of anything. This showed that he was magnanimous. Illusion Princess sat beside the bed and asked, When are you leaving this time? Li Mu said, 3 days at least, 5 days at most. Illusion Princess frowned and said, So soon? Li Mu said, I just came to see if there's anything here. Since there's nothing, I should leave. There are still important things to deal with in the south region. I can't stay for too long. For Zhou Yi again? Not all. In the past, Li Mu worked for the Empress. Now he worked for himself. However, there was no need to explain to Illusion Princess about the Emperor's aura. However, he didn't say anything. The atmosphere in the hall became awkward again. The awkwardness between 2 people was okay. However, the awkwardness between 3 people was even worse. Li Mu hoped that Illusion Princess would leave quickly. However, Illusion Princess didn't have any intention of leaving. She asked, How did you meet your wife? Li Mu asked, Which one are you talking about? Illusion Princess said, 2. Li Mu said, It's a long story. Illusion Princess thought for a while and said, Then tell me how you fell in love with them. This was not a secret. Li Mu said, When I was still a small constable, Qingqing was my superior. We were together every day. We caught ghosts together and subdued demons together. Then we fell in love with each other. Illusion Princess remembered this in her heart and asked, What about Lu Hanyan? Li Mu said, At that time we were neighbors. Neighbors walked with each other every day. It's normal for us to fall in love with each other, right? It would have been better if Illusion Princess didn't mention it. When she mentioned this topic, Li Mu recalled the process of meeting the 2 women in Xianxia County. Although there were many twists and turns, fortunately the heavens were good to him. After going around in circles, they returned to Li Mu's side. Illusion Princess continued to ask, Then when did you fall in love with Zhou Yi? Li Mu was still immersed in his memories. He murmured, There's no specific time to fall in love with someone. Maybe it was when we were in Changle Palace. After a long time, Li Mu was halfway through his words when he suddenly realized something. He immediately shut his mouth. Illusion Princess looked at him and was shocked. You really like Zhou Yi? Li Mu strode to the bed. He didn't know when the Empress had hung up the spiritual conch. He let out a long sigh of relief. In Changle Palace, Zhou Yi, who had already fallen asleep, walked down the bed and walked back and forth in the bedroom. Her hands tightly held the corner of her nightgown. A trace of red cloud quickly appeared on her face. Chapter 5:15. In the middle of the night, Illusion Princess returned to her palace unhappily and summoned Hu Lu. She said gloomily, Li Mu really likes Zhou Yi. If Zhou Yi had taken the initiative, he would have become the Empress of the Great Zhou. I don't understand. We're both Empresses. How am I not as good as Zhou Yi? Is she prettier than me? Does she have a better figure than me? Hu Lu shook her head and said, Her Majesty and the Empress of the Great Zhou are both first-class beauties in the world. In terms of appearance and figure, you can only say that each has her own merits. It's impossible to tell who's better. Then she changed the topic and continued, However, the Great Zhou is vast and far beyond our Thousand Fox nation. Her Majesty can only compete with the Empress of the Great Zhou in terms of status if she unifies the entire demon nation. In addition, the Empress of the Great Zhou is also at the top of the world. She's one realm higher than Her Majesty. Also, Li Mu is at a disadvantage compared to the Empress of the Great Zhou. She has saved Li Mu many times, but we need Li Mu to save us. This is also why you can't compare to her. Stop talking. Illusion Princess waved her hand and interrupted Hu Lu. She called Hu Lu over to comfort her. However, after listening to Hu Lu's words, she felt even worse. After sending Hu Lu away, she lay on the bed and muttered, "Love grows with time." The next morning, just as Li Mu woke up, two beautiful little fox demons walked in with a tray. The breakfast of the Thousand Fox Nation looked very sumptuous. Li Mu couldn't finish it all by himself. He wanted to ask them to take away a few dishes, but when Illusion Princess walked in and sat at the table, he realized that it was a meal for two. Illusion Princess didn't seem to be here to eat breakfast with Li Mu. She talked a lot with Li Mu about the current problems of the Thousand Fox Nation and the future direction of development. From this, it could be seen that Phantom Princess was different from Empress. She was also the ruler of a country, but she was clearly more competent. Huan Ji bit her chopsticks and said, "Our spies in the Sky Wolf tribe have sent back news that the Sage Sect Elder has already left the Demon Kingdom. Do you think we should take this opportunity to attack the Sky Wolf Kingdom and take over the Sky Wolf Kingdom?" Li Mu took a sip of the fruit drink and shook his head. "It's not time yet. A starving camel is still bigger than a horse. With the current strength of the Thousand Fox Kingdom, it won't be easy to completely capture the Celestial Wolf Kingdom. Not to mention the Black Snake and Flying Bear tribes are at their peak strength." "Oh." Huan Ji let out an "oh," and dispelled this thought. After a while she said, "Then teach me Fu Lu and the way of formations. I want to learn." Since he had nothing to do, Li Mu wasn't stingy with these things. In the next 2 days he taught her talisman formations when he had time. He was originally worried that Huan Ji had other motives and was plotting something, but it turned out that Li Mu was overthinking things. He didn't know when she became interested in Fu Lu and formations. She actually studied seriously and pestered Li Mu to teach her from morning till night. It was just that her talent was a little lacking. It was fine to draw low-level Fu Lu, but the failure rate of high-level Fu Lu was very high. With her cultivation, this shouldn't have happened. Thus, Li Mu could teach her over and over again without getting tired of it. In some ways she was exactly the same as Ting Xian. She looked smart and quick-witted, but when it came to learning such profound knowledge, her nature as a poor student was exposed. She was a little stupid, but in the past few days, Li Mu also gained a lot from her. The main thing was the ability to resist charm. When Xiao Bai had 5 tails, the charm in her gestures was sometimes something that Li Mu couldn't resist even without the clear heart art. Huan Ji, a 6-tailed fox, had to change into 3 different sets of beautiful clothes every day. The later it was, the less she wore. Without self-control, he really didn't dare to let her stay by his side. Late at night in Huan Ji's bedroom, she stood barefoot on the ground and admired her graceful body in the mirror. After a while she walked to the table and sat down. She held her chin with one hand and muttered, "How long is a day? Is 10 days enough?" Li Mu and Zhou Xian had agreed that he would come to Thousand Fox Country to find him after he solved the matter of the small demon country. It wasn't until the 5th day when he was teaching Huan Ji a new Fu Lu that Hu Jiu came to report that a human was looking for him outside. Li Mu and Huan Ji walked to the square in front of the palace. Zhou Xian wore a long robe and stood there. He said to Li Mu, "Let's go." Huan Ji looked at Zhou Xian with sullen eyes. Her plan of making love had just started and was forced to stop. She didn't know when she would have such an opportunity again. Li Mu turned to Huan Ji and said, "We're leaving." Huan Ji waved her hand, "Let's go, let's go." It wasn't until the 3 figures disappeared into the horizon that she retracted her gaze and fell into deep thought again. After a while, Huan Ji suddenly looked at Hu Lu and said, "Tell them to speed up the incorporation of the various demon races." Hu Lu hesitated and said, "But Your Majesty, our territory has already expanded greatly. If we continue, we will clash with the territories of the other 3 races." Huan Ji said, "How is this considered large? It's even worse than the Great Zhou. Zhou Yi can control half of the Zhu continent. Why can't I control the entire demon country? Xin Nation, Northern State." After leaving Qianhu Nation, Li Mu and Zhou Xian went directly to Xin Nation's northern state. Great Zhou had 36 counties and Xin Nation had more than 20 states. Their states were on the same level as Great Zhou's counties, but they were different. The Great Zhou court firmly controlled the 36 counties, But Xin nation states were very independent. Every state was highly autonomous. Other than contributing a portion of taxes to the central government every year, the central government's control over the other states was very weak. Even the people's faith was firmly controlled by the religious sects that controlled the various states. The royal family of Xin nation couldn't even get a share. This was also the reason why Xin nation's population was similar to Great Zhou's, but the royal family couldn't produce a seventh realm cultivator. All of Xin nation's faith was divided among countless religious sects in the various states. Not only could they not get much from the various states, but the central government also had to give these religious sects all sorts of benefits every year in exchange for them to manage the various states, suppress rebellions, and prevent this huge country from collapsing. The reason why this country was able to survive until now and not fall apart was because of these religious sects that had different names but were of the same origin. They were all branches of the ancient Xin sect. Their names were different but their teachings were similar. They all divided people into 3, 6, and 9 classes. The upper-class people were served for generations, while the descendants of the lower-class people could only serve the upper-class people. Li Mu had already investigated thoroughly. The one in control of the Xin nation's northern state was a sect called the Vajra sect. This sect had countless followers in the northern state. The Vajra sect's leader had attained the 6th realm under the support of the northern state's citizens' psychokinesis for decades. Xin nation's northern state bordered Great Zhou's southern state, so Li Mu chose this place as his target. If he wanted to implement reforms in northern state, the biggest obstacle would be the Vajra sect. He had to solve this problem first. When the 3 of them flew towards the Vajra sect's Mount Vajra, Li Mu felt that this place was slightly familiar. After carefully identifying it, he remembered that he and Xianxia had been here not long ago. It was here that they took back Yinxin's inner core from the bald man. As Li Mu and the other 2 approached, a figure flew out from the temple on the short mountain. The bald man looked at Li Mu and Xianxia in horror and said angrily, "Didn't I return the inner core to you? Why are you here again?" Li Mu was stunned. He looked at him and asked, "You're the leader of the Vajra sect?" The bald man said in a deep voice, "Why are you looking for me?" Li Mu looked at him and said, "I'm sorry for taking your things last time. This time I'm here to give you something." The bald man was stunned. He asked, "What is it?" Li Mu waved his hand and threw a small bell at him. The small bell quickly covered the sky and covered the bald man, Li Mu, and Zhou Xian. Chapter 5:16. On the mountain path leading to the glorious temple, countless believers saw the giant bell in the sky. "What's that?" "The god has appeared. The god has received the sect master." After a brief moment of shock, their expressions immediately became fanatical. They knelt on the stone steps of the mountain path and kowtowed continuously. After the first glance, no one raised their heads again. Ordinary believers could not look directly at the god. This was one of their teachings. Only the sect master could come into close contact with the god. It was precisely because they did not raise their heads that they did not see the situation inside the bell. Within the Dao Bell, the supreme leader in the hearts of the northern barbarian believers was being beaten up by 2 figures. He was no match for either of them and wanted to escape. However, even after using all of his magic power, he still couldn't break through the bell. Instead, he knocked himself into a daze. A few more spells landed on his body and his clothes were tattered. The bald man's face was filled with grief and anger, and his voice was filled with resentment. "What are you doing? What are you doing? I've given you the inner core and the treasure map of the secret realm, but you still won't let me go. What do you want?" Li Mu looked at him and said, "I want you to leave the northern bang." The bald man shouted, "Why didn't you say so earlier? Leave the northern bang if you want. What are you doing?" Li Mu was stunned for a moment before asking, "You're willing to leave the northern bang?" The bald man said with grief and indignation, "You didn't even ask me. How do you know I'm not willing?" He felt extremely bitter in his heart. The northern bang was his foundation. Of course he was unwilling to leave. However, seeing how ruthless these 2 people were, if he did not agree he would probably die here today. He had cultivated hard for 100 years to reach his current cultivation level. Did he not know which to choose between leaving the northern bang or dying in the northern bang? At this moment, Zhou Xian, who was beside Li Mu, said, "This person's psychokinesis is extremely strong. He must have a great influence here. Instead of chasing him away, why not keep him and provide us with help?" Li Mu glanced at the bald man and said, "This person is too strong. If we keep him we have to be wary of him. Why don't we just kill him?" The bald man's eyelids twitched violently. He immediately spoke in standard Great Zhou Mandarin, "There are believers of my sect in the entire northern state. No matter what you do I can help you." Li Mu said indifferently, "I want you to abolish the hierarchy of the northern state. From now on, there will be no distinction between nobles and peasants. Standardize the legislation of the northern state. Before the law, everyone will be treated equally." The bald man's expression changed greatly and he immediately said, "That's impossible." Li Mu looked at Zhou Xian and said, "Like I said, it's better to kill him." The bald man continued, "If that's impossible, then what is possible? Actually, I've long wanted to enact a new law in the northern state to abolish the status of the untouchables. It's not that we can't discuss it. It's not a big deal, we can go down and talk about it slowly." When the believers on the mountain path raised their heads again, the vision above their heads had disappeared. Their expressions were even more respectful as they walked towards the top of the mountain. In the temple at the top of the mountain, in a magnificent hall, the bald man offered a drop of his soul blood. The light in his eyes had completely dimmed. Offering his soul blood meant that his life no longer belonged to him. It wasn't that he hadn't thought of resisting, but the strength of these two people had already made him suffer twice. That young man was constantly thinking of getting rid of him. Only by obeying them would he have a chance of survival. In fact, after Zhou Xian spoke, Li Mu had the idea of subduing the bald man. If he got rid of him or chased him out of the northern state, all of his and Zhou Xian's actions here would be 100 times more difficult. After all, as two people from Zhou country, it would be hell to do such a thing in the Shan nation. After subduing the bald man, things would become much easier. The various states of the Shan nation were autonomous villages. The matters of a village could be handled by the village. If the village couldn't handle it, they would report it to the temple. With the number of believers of the Vajra sect and their influence in the northern state, it would provide them with a lot of help. Li Mu looked at his shiny head and asked, "What's your name?" The bald man said listlessly, "Sangu." "How old are you this year?" 92. Li Mu didn't expect the bald man to be close to 100 years old. If that was the case, he and Zhou Xian were the two young people who didn't care about martial ethics and teamed up to bully a centenarian like him. But from another perspective, although they were from the Great Zhou, they were now representing the oppressed people of the Shan nation and the northern state. This was the spirit of internationalism. It didn't matter whether they cared about martial ethics or not. Sangu was a noble of the Shan nation. He had shown good talent for cultivation since he was young. Later, his cultivation broke through to the fifth realm and he established the Vajra sect in the northern state. He recruited believers bit by bit and absorbed their power of will. When he was 80 years old, he successfully reached the sixth realm. No wonder he was unwilling to change the hierarchy of the people of the northern state. This was a concept engraved in his bones as an upper-class person for thousands of years. Of course, no concept or persistence was more important than his life. In the end, he still gave in to Li Mu and Zhou Xian. The first thing he did under the instructions of Li Mu and Zhou Xian was to abolish the hierarchy of the people of the northern state. As for the reason for doing so, it couldn't be more simple. As the leader of the Vajra sect and the spokesperson of the god that many people of the northern state believed in, he could push everything to the god. This was not his own decision but an oracle. Many believers saw the vision of heaven and earth and believed it without a doubt. When the lower-class people and pariahs heard this, they naturally cheered. The nobles of the northern state immediately objected with all their might. They were born as upper-class people and had hereditary land. They could enjoy the services of the lower-class people and pariahs. Now how could they be willing to deprive them, their descendants and their descendants of this right? For this, they were even willing to violate the dignity of the sect. However, their resistance seemed so powerless in the face of the absolute power of the Vajra sect. The first thing they lost was their noble status, followed by their land. All the land in the northern state was taken back and distributed to the people of the northern state according to the number of people. These lands did not belong to anyone, but the people could farm on them. Everything that was harvested from the land belonged to the people. This major move won the support of all the pariahs of the northern state. In the past, they did not have any land. All the land belonged to the nobles. They worked for the nobles but could not even exchange food and clothing. This was the first time they had their own land. This meant that they could easily feed a family. After this, the northern state quickly promulgated new laws. The elders in the village no longer had the power to privately punish the villagers. The northern state would redivide the areas and set up government offices. The new laws applied to all the people of the northern state, regardless of whether they were commoners or nobles. Under the new laws, everyone was treated equally. Some people rejoiced while others were shocked, angry, and sorrowful. How dare Sangu treat us like this? Did he forget that he is just like us? In a certain luxurious residence, the nobles of the northern state gathered together. Everyone was filled with righteous indignation. An old man wearing a luxurious robe and holding a golden scepter fiercely slammed his scepter on the ground and shouted, "Spectre, a terrifying spectre is wandering in the northern state. We can't let it continue to wreak havoc. Immediately report to the new capital." Chapter 517. After communicating with the Empress, she asked Li Mu when he would return as usual. Li Mu also wanted to reunite with his family, but the current situation did not allow it. The northern state had just started. The reason why they could achieve so much in such a short time was because they controlled the Vajra sect. It was much easier to force reforms from the top down than from the bottom up. The real difficulty was yet to come. The Xin nation aristocrats in the northern state were strong opponents of the new law. The village elders and other leaders were also unwilling to give up their power. It was difficult for the grassroots to cooperate. Although they did not have much power, they still had the real rulers of the Xin nation behind them. Once they heard the news and reacted, they would definitely send powerhouses to suppress the northern state. He did not expect that the Vajra sect's leader, a sixth realm powerhouse, would be so obedient. Sangu's Vajra sect had done a great job this time. Li Mu had to make some preparations in advance. He summoned Sangu and asked directly, "How many seventh realms do you have in the Xin nation?" Sangu glanced at Li Mu and said, "Nirvana sect, Suffering sect, and Yen sect each have a wisdom realm powerhouse." Ancient Xin nation was the origin of Buddhism. Although ancient Buddhism had disappeared, it still evolved into a few branches. Among them, the Heart sect was a product of Buddhism that spread to the Great Zhou hundreds of years ago. It had nothing to do with the Xin nation's Buddhism. Nirvana sect, Suffering sect, and Yen sect were all in the Xin nation. The Xin nation was the foundation of their believers. Once these three sects interfered, Zhou Xian alone would not be able to resist three seventh realms. Li Mu still had to make a trip to the Yao nation. The Lord of Illusions had been recuperating for so long. Even if he could not recover to his peak, he had already returned to the seventh realm. The Green Wolf King was no longer a threat. Phantom Princess left a seventh realm demon corpse with her. With the Lord of Illusions, it was enough to protect the Thousand Fox Nation. With the northern states Zhou Xian and himself, even if the Xin nation's royal family invited the powerhouses of the three sects, it would be useless. When he returned to the Yao nation this time, Phantom Princess was already in seclusion. Li Mu did not let Hulu disturb her. He quietly took a seventh realm demon corpse and returned to the northern state. Li Mu controlled the airship to fly high in the sky. At a certain moment he suddenly looked down. Below the clouds, on the ground, a figure was frantically fleeing. Several white-robed men chased after him. The leader of the group held a magic staff and said angrily, "You lowly commoner, how dare you offend your superiors? After I catch you, I'll let you suffer 108 punishments before you die." Iagu flew at full speed. His spiritual power was almost exhausted. He wanted to live a good life with Alicia, but when he and Alicia went to the market to buy groceries, Alicia caught the eye of an aristocrat. After a conflict with the aristocrat, he seriously injured the aristocrat's entourage, angering the family behind the aristocrat, and was chased by several priests of the family. Under the teachings of his benefactor, Aragu had already started cultivating. However, he did not know many spells and was no match for these people. He could only flee helplessly. He hadn't been cultivating for long, so his flying speed was far slower than the flying carpets under their feet. Soon they caught up with him. Bang! A magic staff hit Aragu's back hard. He spat out a mouthful of blood and could no longer summon any spiritual power. 5 white-robed men jumped down from the flying carpets and walked toward him step by step. They mocked, "Lowly commoner, run, keep running." Alicia had already settled Alicia. Now that he had settled Alicia down, Aragu no longer had any worries. He clutched his chest and leaned against a tree with difficulty. Looking at the people walking toward him, there was no fear on his face. Instead there was a trace of mockery. He said lightly, "Laugh, laugh. You won't be able to laugh for long. The lowly commoners you speak of will soon take away your land and your self-righteous honor of being superior. The lowly commoners you oppressed will eventually dominate this country." The white-robed man with the magic staff had a gloomy expression. He said coldly, "These traitorous lowly commoners will eventually be suppressed, but you won't live to see that day." With that, the magic staff in his hand emitted a blinding light and went straight for Araga's head. The magic staff flew out halfway and stopped in the air. After the 5 white-robed men's minds buzzed, the spiritual power in their bodies drained rapidly. The next moment they blacked out and fell to the ground. Araga was already prepared for death. This sudden change made him confused. Until a figure slowly descended from the sky, Araga was stunned for a moment. Then excitement appeared on his face. He said in surprise, "Benefactor." Li Mu looked at him and smiled. "Seems like we are really fated." When Li Mu returned to the Vajra sect, there were 2 more people beside him. They were Aragu and his wife, Alicia. Araga's identity was a true lowly commoner. He could represent the oppressed lowly commoners of the northern state. The commoners of the northern state needed such a leader. It was important to have a good reason. After all, Sanggu and his Vajra sect members were the most superior beings in the Shin nation. It was difficult for them to gain the trust of the lowly commoners. A lowly commoner like Aragu was the best candidate to represent them. Although he was still very weak now, Li Mu had his eyes on his future. With a natural spiritual body, as long as he did not slack off in his cultivation, it would be easy for him to advance to the 6th realm in the future. When Li Mu suggested that he should lead the commoners of the northern state, Aragu agreed without hesitation. In the Vajra sect, Sanggu had not seen Li Mu for 2 days. He thought that he had left the Shin nation and was secretly happy. This young man was ruthless and merciless. He almost died in his hands. Seeing him here again, Sanggu felt like a bucket of cold water had been poured over him. The fire that had just been ignited in his heart was extinguished. He originally thought that the central state would not sit by and do nothing with such a huge change happening in the northern state. The new capital would very likely invite the strongest cultivators of the 3 sects to suppress the rebellion. Then he would be able to regain his freedom after being coerced. However, when he saw the tall figure standing behind the young man, his heart sank completely. The silent figure standing behind the young man had a lifeless aura, and he could not see through him at all. He now suspected that the young man was a 7th realm cultivator. If he was, then the northern state would be completely out of the central state's control from now on. There were only 3 7th realm cultivators in the entire Shin nation. If the northern state had a 7th realm cultivator, they would immediately be on equal footing with the 3 sections. Even the 3 sects would not easily offend them. He looked at Li Mu tentatively and asked, "Sir, this is?" Li Mu looked at him indifferently and said, "Don't ask what you shouldn't ask." Sanggu immediately shut his mouth. However, he was almost certain that this young man was undoubtedly a 7th realm cultivator. His future days would be even more bleak. Just as this thought appeared in his mind, he suddenly turned to look into the distance. At the end of the southern horizon, a powerful aura appeared. A bald man wearing a tattered kasaya broke through the air. The man's kasaya was full of holes and he was barefoot. He did not even have shoes. However, the aura on his body was at the 6th realm. The man rapidly approached the temple and his voice rolled over. "Sanggu, come out and see me." There were not many cultivators in the Shin nation and they were all familiar with each other. Sanggu had already recognized the newcomer. He was Elder Fan Tian of the Ku sect. 20 years ago he had already stepped into the 6th realm. He was about to bite the bullet and fly up, but another figure was faster than him. The tall man whose cultivation Sanggu could not see through disappeared instantly. When he reappeared he was already high up in the sky flying towards Elder Fan Tian. Elder Fan Tian snorted coldly and waved his palm forward. His palm rapidly enlarged and pressed down on the tall man. Sanggu's throat moved and he secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Elder Fan Tian was the 3rd most powerful cultivator in the Ku sect. His attack was a Buddhist abhijna. This palm seemed ordinary but it contained a part of the world. It was suppressed by the power of the world and it could not be broken by anyone below the 7th realm. Even if he faced this palm he would have to retreat. Faced with this palm, the tall figure did not dodge or retreat. Instead, he crashed into it. There was a deafening sound, accompanied by violent mana fluctuations. The giant palm collapsed immediately. The figure did not slow down and crashed into Elder Fan Tion's body. A golden light erupted from Elder Fan Tion's body. That was his indestructible Buddhist Dharma body. Even so, he was still knocked back 100 feet. Blood spurted from his mouth. The figure's sharp nails pierced into his body, sealing his mana instantly. Then the demon corpse carried Elder Fan Tian by the neck and flew to Li Mu. It casually threw him on the ground. Sanggu's throat moved again. Without hesitation, he kicked Elder Fan Tian's body and shouted, "Speak, who sent you here? What are you doing here?" Chapter 5:18. Elder Fan Tian's cultivation was sealed. He looked at the tall figure with fear in his eyes. The seventh realm. The North actually had a seventh realm cultivator. After the Central State received the news of the North's rebellion, they immediately asked for help from the Ku sect. He came here under the orders of the Supremacy to suppress Sanggu. He thought that it would be a piece of cake, but he was captured in the blink of an eye. The person who attacked him just now must be in the seventh realm. In this case, even the Ku sect would not be able to interfere. After all, they only had one venerable one in the seventh realm. Provoking such a powerhouse would bring disaster to the sect. Elder Fan Tian did not even think and immediately said, "I'm only here under the orders of the Supremacy to investigate the North's rebellion. I didn't mean to offend you. Please forgive me." In Buddhism, the term supremacy was used to refer to a 7th grade Prajna realm cultivator. The Xin nation was not like the Great Zhou, and Buddhism was not like Taoism. After Yuzhenzi advanced 2 years ago, there were 4 7th realm cultivators in Fulu school alone. In the entire Xin nation, only the 3 Buddhist sects had 1 7th realm cultivator each. Therefore, the appearance of a 7th realm cultivator in the Xin nation was enough to change the entire situation. This was also the reason why Li Mu brought the demon corpse here. His existence could make the 3 top cultivators in the Xin nation not dare to act rashly. Before Li Mu could speak, Sanggu asked, "Sir, he's the 3rd strongest cultivator in the Ku sect. His name is Fan Tian. How should we deal with him?" After the demon corpse revealed its strength, Sanggu was obviously more perceptive. Li Mu looked at him and said, "Let him go." Sanggu was stunned and asked, "What?" Li Mu waved his hand and said, "Since he didn't mean to offend you, give him a chance. Go back and tell your Supremacy to stop interfering in the North's affairs. Otherwise, we will personally visit your Supremacy and talk to him." He let the demon corpse remove the restriction of Brahma's mana. Brahma climbed up from the ground. He already knew who was in charge here. He respectfully gave Li Mu a Buddhist salute and said, "Junior will take his leave." Seeing Brahma leave, Sanggu asked in confusion, "My lord, he is an important figure of the bitter sect. Why did you let him go?" He knew very well that after this 7th realm powerhouse appeared, the Central State would no longer be able to do anything to the Northern State. For a very long time to come, his fate would be tied to these people. Under such circumstances, he had to start making plans for himself. Li Mu looked at Sanggu in surprise. These days, when he was asked to do things, he was always unwilling. This time he actually took the initiative to think for them. He then explained, "The Xin nation's problem is in the bones, not the skin. To change the Northern State, it will take at least a few decades. We have no enmity with the bitter sect, so we don't have to become enemies with them." To be honest, Li Mu did not have a good impression of the Xin nation and had no intention of changing it. His great ambition was to bring peace to the Great Zhou, not the Xin nation. However, the Xin nation and the Northern State shared a border with the Great Zhou. The stability of the Northern State and the Southern State of the Great Zhou were the most important. He had already asked Sanggu to announce to the public that the Northern State would be independent from now on. From now on, the Xin nation and the Northern State would become independent countries. The Xin nation and the Great Zhou would no longer share a direct border. The soldiers of the Southern Army could also live a peaceful and stable life. Since Li Mu had already spoken, Sanggu could not say anything else. He inadvertently glanced behind Li Mu and realized that a young man behind him was looking at Li Mu with an extremely respectful gaze. From his clothes and skin color, he should be a lowly citizen of the Xin nation. Sanggu's gaze moved away from him and quickly returned back. He was shocked. He stepped in front of Aragu and grabbed his wrist. He muttered, "Such a physique, such a physique." Aragu was shocked. At this moment Sangu spoke urgently, I am Sangu. Are you willing to acknowledge me as your master? Everyone in the northern state knew of Sangu's name. He was the belief of the Vajra sect. However, Aragu, whose thoughts had changed, did not respect him. Instead, he was somewhat repulsed. He knelt in front of Li Mu and said, I want to acknowledge you as my master. Li Mu did not even think about it. He waved his hand and said, I don't accept disciples. If you are willing, you can acknowledge Sangu as your master. He is more than capable of teaching you. His benefactor was already a godlike existence in his heart. Although he could not acknowledge him as his master, which disappointed Aragu, he did not dare to ask to become his benefactor's disciple. He knelt in front of Sangu and said, Greetings, master. Everything he had experienced made him understand that he had to have enough strength to protect himself and his loved ones. Only then could he do what he wanted to do. Sangu looked at Li Mu gratefully. Li Mu turned and walked out of the hall. Sangu did not have much lifespan left. To them, no matter how powerful they were when they were alive, it was inevitable that they would return to dust after their lifespan was exhausted. When there was no hope of breaking through in their later years, many people's greatest wish was to find a disciple to pass on their lifelong knowledge. With Araga's physique, even a 7th-level cultivator would not be able to resist snatching him, let alone a 6th-level cultivator. It was good to have a cultivator like Sangu teach him. It would save him a lot of detours on the path of cultivation. Zhou Xian walked over from afar and said, I'm not used to the Vajra sect's people. When you return to Shen, do transfer Wei Ping over. Li Mu nodded and said, There's no need to return to Shendu. I can do it now. He took out the spirit snail. After dialing, a sweet voice came from the spirit snail. Daddy, when are you coming back? Ling misses you, Li Mu smiled and said, Ling be good. I'll be back soon. Give the spirit snail to your mother. I have something to tell her. Hearing the sound coming from the other side of the spirit snail, Li Mu said, Your Majesty, when you're free, give a decree to send Wei Ping, the head of the Ministry of Justice, to Xin country's northern state. After talking to the Empress and chatting for a while, Li Mu put away the spirit snail. However, he noticed that Zhou Xian was looking at him strangely. Li Mu asked, What are you looking at? Zhou Xian shook his head and said, Nothing, Your Majesty. Xin country central state. On a flattened mountaintop, there was a group of magnificent temples that occupied a large area. On the top floor of the tallest pagoda in the group of temples, Brahma put his hands together and said, Venerable One, this is what happened. If it wasn't for the mercy of that senior, I would have passed away. An old monk sitting cross-legged on a lotus throne with his eyebrows hanging down to his chest slowly opened his eyes and said, Our foundation isn't in northern state. Since that's the case, we don't have to care about northern state anymore. The Ku sect only had one venerable one and couldn't afford to offend a 7th realm cultivator. There was no need to offend a 7th realm cultivator for the imperial court. Brahma asked, If that's the case, how do we explain it to the imperial court? The old monk said, Tell them the truth. Brahma bowed and said, As you wish. Xin country central state new capital. In the palace hall, the young emperor of Xin country gathered the important officials to discuss the rebellion in northern state. Your Majesty, don't worry. Elder Brahma has already gone to northern state. I believe the rebellion will be quelled soon. Although I don't know what's wrong with Sangu, he's definitely no match for Elder Brahma. With Elder Fantion here, nothing will happen. While everyone was discussing enthusiastically, an official stumbled in from outside and shouted, Your Majesty, it's bad. Northern State has sent an urgent message. Northern State has declared independence. Preposterous. The Emperor of Xin country was furious. He pulled out the sword that symbolized power from his waist and pointed to the north. He said, Send troops, we must send troops. Gather the defense forces and send troops to Northern State immediately. An official advised, Your Majesty, please calm down. Elder Brahma hasn't returned yet. Perhaps the rebellion in Northern State has been quelled. As soon as he said that, another official hurriedly ran in from outside and said while panting, Your Majesty, news from the Ku sect. Elder Brahma has returned. The Venerable One has passed down a decree that the Ku sect will no longer interfere in Northern State's affairs. An official asked in shock, Why? Could it be that even Elder Brahma can't quell the rebellion? Even if Elder Brahma can't, the Venerable One doesn't have to give such a decree. The emperor of Shin country was even angrier. He clenched the sword in his hand and said in a deep voice, "Send troops." The official hurriedly said, "Your Majesty, you can't." Elder Brahma said that there's a seventh realm powerhouse behind Sangu. Even the Ku sect doesn't want to provoke him. The expression on the Shin emperor's face froze. After he regained his senses, he loosened his grip on the sword and put it away. He used his sleeve to gently wipe the blade and said in a low voice, "It's not good to send troops. It's just one northern state. Our Shin dynasty has more than 20 states. It doesn't matter if there's one more northern state or one less northern state. Don't you think?" Chapter 519. Your Majesty is wise. If even the bitter sect doesn't want to provoke them, the other two sects won't easily offend them either. Let's give up on the northern state in exchange for the stability of the other states. The Shin emperor spoke and the officials all agreed. A few of them showed hesitation on their faces. Their lips moved as if they wanted to say something, but due to the general trend, they couldn't say anything in the end. The young Shin emperor put his sword back into its scabbard, waved his hand and said, "Disperse. Order the northern army to withdraw from the northern state and return to the Immerse state. Defend the northern defense line to the death. We can't let them occupy the new state again." The officials obeyed and retreated. The Shin prince paced back and forth in the main hall. He gritted his teeth and said, "The Great Zhou, it must be the damn Great Zhou that's causing trouble." The Shin kingdom and the Great Zhou had hundreds of years of hatred. When the last central dynasty on the Zhou continent collapsed, the Shin kingdom was the most powerful among the countries on the Zhou continent. They wanted to take advantage of that once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to unify the Zhou continent, but the newly established Great Zhou led troops to attack the new capital and almost destroyed the country. That war broke the backbone of the Shin kingdom, causing them to be unable to recover for decades. This was the eternal pain in the hearts of every Shin kingdom citizen and every Shin royal family member. The dying dream of the previous emperors was to conquer the Great Zhou dynasty and unify the ancestral continent. They originally had this opportunity, but the Shao royal family had already decayed to the extreme in the past few years. The Shin kingdom had secretly prepared for this, and then that woman ascended to the throne. She used 5 years to lead the Great Zhou back to its peak, causing the Shin kingdom's decades of preparation to go up in smoke. The Shin emperor took a deep breath and squeezed out a voice from between his teeth. "Venerables and elders? None of them are reliable at critical times. So, Your Majesty, do you want to consider cooperating with us?" A voice suddenly sounded. The Shin emperor's expression changed. He looked at a shadow in the corner and said sternly, "Who's there? Come out, Ninjun Great Zhou." Under the towering monument of heroes, the southern army of the Great Zhou and the northern army of the Shin kingdom faced each other across the river. Under the iron fist of official Li in recent days, no one from the Shin kingdom dared to cross the border and cause trouble. Instead they faced each other across the river. Shin country's north bank, a stream of light flew over from afar and flew into the Shin country's northern army's tent. 2 hours later, there was a sudden commotion in the northern Indian army, and many people began to move. When the sentry of the southern army saw this scene, he immediately said, "Quick, the people of the Shin nation are making a move. Quickly inform Commander Zhang." After receiving the news, Commander Zhang immediately left the military camp and went to the border. He asked in a deep voice, "What happened to the people of the Shin kingdom?" Several high-ranking military officers stood by the riverbank and looked at the other side with puzzlement on their faces. At first, when the northern army of the Shin kingdom made a move, they thought that the other party was going to provoke them on a large scale. They were already on full alert and prepared for war. However, the actions of the other side made them somewhat confused. After the commotion in the northern army of the Shin kingdom, they began to tear down the tents of the camp, smashing the stoves built outside, and pulling down the northern army flag erected in front of the camp. A deputy general was puzzled and said in shock, "What are they doing? Are they going to rebuild the camp?" Another general said, "Why does it look like they're retreating? Damn, they're really leaving. The northern army is retreating from the border. What are they doing?" All the soldiers of the southern army stood by the riverbank and watched as the northern army of the Shin kingdom tore down their camp, leaving behind a mess, and retreated. Some of them had been guarding the border for decades and had fought with the northern army of the Shin kingdom for decades. This was the first time they had seen such a strange scene. This was the border between the two countries. How could the Xin kingdom withdraw their army for no reason? When the generals saw this, they became vigilant. What trick is this? Are they deliberately acting like they're retreating to make us lower our guard? Why are the people of the Xin kingdom so careless? We still can't let our guard down. Just as everyone was worried, a dragon's roar came from the sky. 2 streams of light landed in the crowd. Commander Zhang walked forward and cupped his hands. Lord Li, the northern army of the Xin kingdom suddenly retreated for no reason. In your opinion, this? Li Mu smiled and said, don't worry, this is a normal military movement. The Xin kingdom and the northern kingdom are already independent. Naturally, the northern army will not be allowed to stay. From now on, the Great Zhou will no longer border the Xin kingdom. The soldiers of the southern army can live in peace. What? The Xin kingdom and the northern kingdom are independent? How is this possible? When the generals heard this, they all exclaimed. The northern kingdom was a part of the Xin kingdom, just like the southern county would always be an inseparable territory of the Great Zhou. Whether it was an external invasion or internal strife in the southern county, the imperial court would not sit idly by. Think about it, would the Great Zhou allow the southern county to be independent? Only Commander Zhang was shocked. He looked at Li Mu and asked, Lord Li, did you do this? Li Mu waved his hand and said, I only did a little work. It's not worth mentioning. All right, I'll have to trouble Commander Zhang to go to the county office and let them tell the public about this matter so that the people of the southern county can rest assured. Commander Zhang came back to his senses after a long time. He cupped his hands and bowed deeply to Li Mu. He said, I admire Lord Li from the bottom of my heart. The people of the Xin kingdom provoked the Great Zhou at the border of the northern kingdom. They thought that Lord Li would beat the northern army of the Xin kingdom until they were afraid, and that would be the end of this matter. They did not expect that he would directly take drastic measures to make the northern kingdom of the Xin kingdom independent. The northern kingdom of the Xin kingdom would become an independent country. This way, the Great Zhou and the Xin kingdom would no longer be neighbors, and the southern county would no longer be harassed by the Xin kingdom. He did not know how Lord Li did it, but there was no doubt that from now on, the soldiers of the southern army would have a good life. Once this news was spread, the entire southern army was excited. When the people of South County heard about this exciting news from the officials, Li Mu had already ridden on Xianxia and was on his way home. As for Ao Run, because of his recent good performance, he was given a long vacation by Li Mu and returned to the eastern county to reunite with his wife and concubine. On this day, when the officials of the Great Zhou were attending the morning court, a strange phenomenon suddenly occurred in the ancestral temple of the imperial palace. Golden light shone out from the ancestral temple and could be seen clearly everywhere in the divine capital. Mr. Mei hurried to the ancestral temple to check and soon returned to the Ziwei palace. He said, Your Majesty, for some reason, the psychic power of the southern county's psychic power cauldron in the ancestral temple suddenly increased. The golden light of the ancestral temple was emitted by this cauldron. When the officials heard this, they were both happy and suspicious. They were happy because the increase of any county's psychic power was beneficial to the condensation of Emperor Qi. Soon the Great Zhou would have another seventh realm powerhouse. They were suspicious because the southern county and the Xin kingdom bordered each other. The people of the southern county were often harassed by the people of the Xin kingdom. Their psychic power had always been ranked last among the 36 counties. Why would it suddenly increase? The originally quiet imperial court immediately became noisy. What happened in the southern county? Psychic power wouldn't increase for no reason. Could it be related to the Xin kingdom? But the imperial court hasn't taken any action against the Xin kingdom recently. This matter is really strange. Assistant Minister of the Secretariat Lu Yi suddenly thought of something and muttered, Lord Li seemed to have gone to the southern county a few days ago. When the official beside him heard this, he immediately guessed, could it be that Lord Li did something? Another official said decisively, it must be. If Lord Li isn't in the divine capital, then he must have gone on a secret mission. Silence. A voice came from behind the curtain, causing the originally noisy court to instantly quiet down. Her Majesty the Empress now had absolute authority in the imperial court. No matter how many people talked about her behind her back, there was an undeniable fact that she was the ruler of the Great Zhou's resurgence. Whether it was the people or the court, many voices believed that the Empress's achievements had already surpassed Emperor Wen's. Behind the curtain, Zhou Yi said calmly, "The increase in psychic power in the southern county might be because of the independence of the Xin Kingdom and the Northern Bang. There's no need to doubt. If there's anything, please report. If there's nothing, the court will be dismissed." The court fell into a long silence. Seeing that no one was going to report, Zhou Yi's figure gradually disappeared behind the curtain. After a long silence, the first voice appeared in the court. Then it became noisy again. "What did Her Majesty just say? The Xin Kingdom and the Northern Bang are independent? When did this happen? Why didn't the departments receive any news?" This heavy news shook the hearts of the courtiers. The last time they talked about the Xin nation was when the Northern Army in the Xin nation's Northern Army provoked a dispute at the border. How long had it been since then? The Xin nation's Northern Army was gone. It was no wonder that the psychic power in the southern county had increased. The Xin Kingdom was divided, so how could they bother to harass the Great Zhou? Moreover, although the states of the Xin Kingdom had always been independent, the division of a state and independence was something that happened in the previous dynasty of the Xin Kingdom. They would not believe that the Great Zhou had not interfered in this. After hearing this news, they recalled what had happened recently and found some clues. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice said, "I was still curious. Manager Wei was doing well in the Ministry of Justice and was about to be promoted. Why did Her Majesty suddenly send him to the southern county? I think he didn't go to the southern county of the Great Zhou but the northern Bang of the Xin Kingdom. Brilliant, this move is really brilliant. After losing the northern Bang, if the Xin Kingdom wants to provoke the Great Zhou again, they can only bypass the Ghost Realm from the west. From now on, the southern border of the Great Zhou will be free of worries." After the morning court dispersed, the officials discussed for a long time in the Ziwei Hall before returning to their respective offices. Soon, the news of the northern Bang of the Xin Kingdom's independence spread to the ears of the people of the divine capital. The people were still puzzled by the golden light emitted from the palace just now. When they heard the news, they were all excited. Because of the previous emperor's decree, they did not have a good impression of the people of the Xin Kingdom. In addition, the people of the Xin Kingdom provoked them at the border, causing the people to hate them even more. They were very happy to see the Xin Kingdom on fire. Li Mu was 10 miles away from the divine capital. He asked Xianxia to transform into her human form and fly into the city at a low altitude. Ever since she entered the divine capital, Xianxia's eyes had been looking around. Clearly, for a little female dragon who had grown up in the sea and had only been to the Xin Kingdom with Li Mu, the divine capital of the Great Zhou was the real world of flowers to her. Everything here was so new and interesting. Looking at the children on the street happily licking sugar-coated haws, she casually took one from the haystack on the shoulder of a passing sugar-coated haws vendor. She put it in her mouth and took a bite. The sweet and sour taste made her eyes turn into crescents. Seeing that she was about to leave after eating the sugar-coated haws, the vendor suddenly became anxious. He hurriedly chased after her and said, "Hey miss, you're so beautiful. Why don't you pay for your food?" Li Mu took out a few copper coins and handed them to him, saying, "I'm sorry. Is this enough?" It's enough, it's enough." The vendor nodded. Just as he was about to take the coins, he looked up and saw Li Mu. He was stunned for a moment and then said happily, "Lord Li, when did you come back? I haven't seen you in a long time." Li Mu said, "I just entered the city." The vendor immediately said, "Then I can't accept this money. This little thing isn't worth much. I'll just take it as a gift to this miss. I wish Lord Li and this miss a long and happy life together and have a child soon." In the hearts of the people of the divine capital, his image as a lecher could not be changed. Li Mu forced the payment and did not explain to him. He took Xianxia to the Li mansion. Along the way, there were many people who greeted him warmly. In the crowd, one of the people seemed to have realized something and whispered, "The Xin Kingdom and the Northern Bang didn't become independent earlier or later. They just had to become independent when Lord Li wasn't here." He looked at Li Mu's back and asked loudly, "Lord Li, where have you been these days?" Li Mu looked back at him and said, "South County." Looking at his back, the man slapped his thigh and said repeatedly, "I knew it, I knew it." After Li Mu entered the city, it took him a long time to reach the door. In the Li mansion, when Xiao Bai happily ran over to open the door and Lu Hanyan and the others walked to the door, they all looked at Ao Xianxia who was behind Li Mu. In order to give the Empress a surprise, Li Mu did not tell her about Xianxia. Of course he also did not tell Lu Hanyan and the others. Lu Hanyan pulled Li Mu to the side and asked in a low voice, "What's going on?" Before Li Mu could explain, Lu Hanyan pinched his waist. She glared at Li Mu and said angrily, "Have I been too good to you? You even dare to bring her back without saying anything. What about you? Let me tell you, I will only forgive you this time. There won't be a next time. Otherwise I will bring Sister Qing and Wanwan back to Mount Baiyun. You can live with these little vixens." Li Mu looked at her and said innocently, "What are you thinking? You didn't agree. How would I dare to bring people home casually? This is the mount I caught for Her Majesty." He waved his hand at Qing Exan and said, "Qing Exan, let them see your identity." Qing Exan nodded obediently. A pair of dragon horns gradually grew out of her forehead. Xiao Bai grabbed Li Mu's arm and subconsciously hid behind him. The pressure of the dragon clan made her, who only had a trace of the heavenly fox bloodline, naturally feel afraid. As the top race on the continent, Lu Hanyan and the others had never seen the dragon clan before. They surrounded Qing Exan and sized her up, making her feel very uncomfortable. However, after secretly glancing at Li Mu, no matter how uncomfortable she was, she could only endure it. There was a fluctuation in the space in the courtyard. The Empress slowly appeared with Zhongling in her arms. "Father." When Zhongling saw Li Mu, she immediately flew over happily. Li Mu held her in his arms and walked to the Empress's side. He looked at Qing Exan and said, "Your Majesty, this is the mount that I promised you. This dragon has committed a crime in the South County. I punish her to be your mount for 3 years. Ao Qing Exan looked at the woman in front of her and finally knew who her master for the next 3 years would be. Her future master was not only a beautiful young lady, but also a very powerful young lady. She was even more powerful than her father and even her grandfather. In front of such a powerhouse, her pride as a member of the dragon clan quickly dissipated without a trace. Before Li Mu came back, he was worried that Lu Hanyan and Li Qing would be unhappy that he only gave the Empress a mount. Later it turned out that he was thinking too much. If it was just an ordinary gift, they would definitely feel unbalanced in their hearts. However, this was a dragon. Other than the Empress, who else was qualified to find a dragon as a mount? 4 hours later, Li Mu brought the women and the Empress, who had changed her appearance, to walk on the streets of the divine capital. Ao Qing Exan followed behind the Empress step by step, looking like a competent follower. The women were shopping while Li Mu silently absorbed telekinesis. In a short 4 hours, the telekinesis of the people of the divine capital had increased by several times. Lu Hanyan walked in front and asked Ao Qing Exan, "What did you do when you were in the Thousand Fox country?" Ao Qing Exan said, "Nothing. I just cultivated in my room." Lu Hanyan glanced at Li Mu and asked, "What about him?" Ao Qing Exan shook his head and said, "I don't know. My lord stays in the room with that queen every day. I don't know what he's doing." Li Mu raised his eyebrows and immediately explained, "What do you mean you don't know what he's doing?" "I didn't do anything. If you don't believe me, you can ask His Majesty. I stayed in the Thousand Fox country for a few days to wait for Lord Zhou. In order to promote the stability of the southern border." Zhou Yi snorted and said, "What's the use of asking me? I don't know what you did with that vixen in the room." Li Mu had no choice but to say, "I'm wholeheartedly for the people. Even if you don't believe me, you should listen to the voices of the people." On the streets not far away, there were many people discussing the matter of the Shin country. "I heard that the matter of the Shin country's northern bang was done by Lord Li." "No way." "What do you mean no way?" "Shin country's northern bang became independent, and Lord Li just happened to come back from the southern county. Even if you think with your feet, you know why Lord Li went to the southern county. With Lord Li around, it's a blessing for the people and the great Zhou." The people chatted for a while and the topic gradually changed. "Didn't they say that Her Majesty and Lord Li have a child? When does Her Majesty plan to make Lord Li the Empress? I want to know too. We're so anxious. But if that's the case, what about Lord Li's wife?" "That's true, but if Lord Li can't be with Her Majesty, I'm afraid everyone will be upset." Soon no one beside Li Mu spoke. Lu Hanyan was expressionless. Li Qing lowered her head and did not say anything. Wanwan was at a loss. Xiao Bai looked at Li Mu and then at Zhou Yi. Li Mu and Zhou Yi looked at each other and the Empress immediately looked away. Chapter 520. Li Mu heard the cries of the people, but so did Lu Hanyan and the Empress. The Empress was the first to break the awkwardness. She glanced at Li Mu and said, I still have a few reports to deal with. I will return to the palace first. With that she turned and walked into the crowd, quickly disappearing. Lu Hanyan also glanced at Li Mu and said, Go back. Why are you still standing here? Do you want to hear the cries of the people again? Life was full of surprises. If Li Mu knew that this would be the case when he returned to Shin capital, he would rather stay in the Shin kingdom for a few more days and do his part to liberate the oppressed people of the world. As expected, Lu Hanyan went to sleep with Li Qing that night. This meant that Li Mu would have to sleep alone in the study. In Li Qing's room, the two of them were still awake. They called Wan Wan and Xiao Bai to play cards together. Ever since they no longer needed to cultivate, they had more things to do for entertainment. Li Qing glanced in the direction of Li Mu's study and then looked at Lu Hanyan. She hesitated and said, He just came back. It's not good for us to do this, is it? Lu Hanyan looked at her and asked, He is our husband. Why would the people say such things? Are you not angry at all that you want them to be together? Li Qing only smiled and said, Sister, didn't you accept Her Majesty long ago? Why don't you tell him directly? Lu Hanyan snorted and said, Wouldn't that be letting them off easy? I won't say anything. I want to see how long they can pretend to be stupid for. Anyway, it's quite fun to watch the show. Then she glanced at Li Qing and said, You are not allowed to say it either. You are not his leader now. Don't try to protect him every time. Li Qing could only nod. Lu Hanyan then looked at Xiao Bai and Wan Wan. The two girls immediately promised. Li Mu was lying on the bed in the study. He had a lot on his mind and couldn't fall asleep. Suddenly he heard a creak in his ear. The window of the study room was pushed open, and a petite body got into his bed. Xiao Bai mysteriously whispered into Li Mu's ear, Benefactor, let me tell you a secret. Don't tell Sister Lu that I told you. Li Mu was puzzled. What secret? Xiao Bai leaned close to Li Mu's ear and whispered, Sister Lu agreed to you and Sister Zhou a long time ago. She said that she wanted to see how long you guys could play dumb for. She wanted to watch the show. After Li Mu came back to his senses, he kissed her hard on the cheek. In this family, Xiao Bai would always be his sweet little jacket. Although Lu Hanyan had expressed such thoughts several times as the first wife of the Li family, if she didn't make it clear, no one would dare to act blindly without thinking. Since he knew what she was thinking, Li Mu didn't have anything to worry about. The next morning he ate breakfast and went to Changle Palace as usual. The Empress wasn't there. Only Mr. Mei was. Li Mu asked casually, Where's Her Majesty? Mr. Mei said, She's admiring the flowers in the Imperial Garden. Why are you looking for Her Majesty? Li Mu sat behind the table stacked with memorials and said, Nothing. I'm starting to get busy. Mr. Mei left Changle Palace and went to the Imperial Garden. He said to Zhou Yi, who was staring at a bunch of roses in a daze, Your Majesty, Li Mu is here. Zhou Yi didn't say anything. She picked a rose and peeled off the petals one by one. Mr. Mei and Shangguan Li looked at each other and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. Her Majesty loved and cherished flowers, but now she was picking flowers. This meant that she was in a bad mood. When she came back from outside the palace yesterday, she was in a bad mood. Without a doubt, someone must have provoked her again. Zhou Yi peeled off a flower until only the bud was left, then returned to Changle Palace. Li Mu was reading memorials. He looked up and said, Your Majesty, yesterday on the street. Without waiting for him to finish, Zhou Yi said, The people speak without thinking. I didn't take it to heart. You don't have to worry about it. Just explain it to your wife. Li Mu shook his head and said, Although they speak without thinking, this is the voice of the people. It represents the will of the people. Zhou Yi didn't expect Li Mu to say this. Her heart beat faster. She forced herself to appear calm and asked, What do you mean? A few days ago in Qianhu country, Li Mu had secretly confessed to her. With the Empress's guard against Huanji, how could she take the initiative to break off the spirit conch when Li Mu and Huanji were alone in a room in the middle of the night? He had made up his mind with great difficulty, but she pretended that nothing had happened. Now she was asking the obvious. She couldn't let Li Mu take the initiative every time. Moreover, with their status, there were some things that Li Mu couldn't take the initiative. Li Mu lowered his head again and said, I don't mean anything else. It's fine as long as your Majesty doesn't take it to heart. Although Zhou Yi wasn't young, she had no experience in relationships. She was too thin-skinned. If she was impatient, she wouldn't be able to win the Empress' heart. It was better to take it step by step. Li Mu read a few more memorials. Then he rubbed the space between his eyebrows and rested on the table. Zhou Yi leaned absent-mindedly on the dragon throne. Her mind was in a mess. She inadvertently glanced at Li Mu. She discovered that he was smiling even as he slept. She didn't know what he was dreaming about. She was a bit angry. Her heart was complicated, but he was sleeping soundly. She looked left and right. Seeing that there was no one around, she secretly made a hand seal. Suddenly, an image appeared before her eyes. This was Li Mu's dream that she had seen through the dream peeping technique. Zhou Yi pursed her lips. I want to see what you're dreaming about. She was very familiar with the place in the image. It was her imperial garden. In the midst of the flowers, Li Mu was holding a woman's hand. They were admiring the flowers. He dared to take another woman to her imperial garden in his dream. Zhou Yi was angry. She was about to disturb Li Mu's beautiful dream. However, when she looked up and saw the woman's face, her body couldn't help but tremble. The woman Li Mu was holding hands with in the imperial garden in his dream was none other than herself. The anger in Zhou Qian's heart instantly disappeared without a trace. His eyes were filled with joy and anticipation as he stared at the scene in the sky. Even his breathing slowed down. At this time, the sound of footsteps came from outside Changle Palace. Mr. Mei and Shangwanli walked in. Zhou Yi immediately dispelled the image and sat up straight. However, her eyes swept over Li Mu from time to time. She was extremely curious about what he was dreaming about. Mr. Mei and Shangwanli walked into Changle Palace. The sound of footsteps suddenly woke Li Mu up. He sat up straight and looked at the Empress guiltily. He was about to continue reading when Zhou Yi suddenly asked, I saw that you were sleeping soundly. What did you dream about? Li Mu shook his head and said, I didn't dream about anything. Mr. Mei glanced at him and said, Ali and I were standing outside the hall. We saw you smiling. How could you say you didn't dream about anything? Li Mu smiled embarrassedly and said, I dreamed about my wife. Zhou Yi's face turned red for no reason. She quickly returned to normal and said, Changle Palace is stuffy. Come with me to the Imperial Garden. Ali Mei Wei, you two stay here and tidy up. Li Mu stood up and said, As you wish. Shangwanli took a few deep breaths as she tidied up the imperial desk. She asked, Is it stuffy here? And His Majesty just came back from the Imperial Garden. Mr. Mei glanced at her and said, Hurry up and do your work. Why do you have so many questions? In the Imperial Garden, Zhou Yi walked in front. She was in a good mood and had a smile on her face. Li Mu followed behind her with a faint smile on his face. Chapter 521. In the inner mansion department, Shangwanli and Mr. Mei each came out with a box of high-quality incense. Shangwanli was puzzled. That's strange. When did Her Majesty like to use incense? Didn't she hate these things before? She said that this kind of fragrance makes it difficult to concentrate and makes one sleepy. Mr. Mei shrugged and said, It's not just Her Majesty who is strange. Li Mu has already treated Changle Palace as his sleeping place. He doesn't read many reports every day and has to lie down and sleep for at least 4 hours. It seems that having too many women at home isn't always a good thing. Changle Palace. Several burners of incense were burning. Daoist leaned against a pillar and dozed off. There was a trace of crystal at the corner of her mouth and a happy smile on her face. The fate of being someone's mount was completely different from what she had imagined. She thought that she would be ridden every day in the future, going through wind and rain, waking up early and sleeping late. She didn't expect that the life of a mount would be to live in a large and luxurious palace. She had nothing to do every day except wait for 3 meals in the morning, afternoon, and evening. There were countless delicious dishes here, unlike the Dragon Palace where there were only lobsters and abalones. She had long been tired of eating them. Opposite Daoist, Li Mu lay on the table and continued to weave his dream. With the Empress peeping from outside, he didn't dare to have any adult scenes in his dream, but occasionally holding hands and hugging was still okay. Although his relationship with the Empress hadn't developed further in reality in the long run, it could always melt the defenses in her heart. On the dragon throne, Zhou Yi was holding a book upside down. The content of the book wasn't words but a dynamic scene. She used the book to cover it so that only she could see it. In the scene, Li Mu was planting vegetables on the grassland beside the lake. In the flower field not far away, Another Zhou Yi was holding a pair of scissors and trimming the flowers. Leaning on the dragon throne, Zhou Yi's face was hidden behind the pages of the book. A look of longing appeared on her face. This was the life she longed for. Was this Li Mu's plan for the future? A possibility suddenly appeared in her mind. What would she do if Li Mu told her what he thought? She had never experienced such a thing before. Just thinking about it made her feel a little helpless. These past few days she had fantasized countless times. If there really was such a day they could confess their feelings to each other. How would they get along in the future? Her heart was nervous and expectant. When Li Mu got up from the table and looked at Zhou Yi, she immediately put down the book in her hand and hurriedly stood up. She said, "I'm going to the Imperial Garden alone to relax. Don't follow me." Of course, Li Mu knew that if no one wanted to follow them, it meant that he shouldn't. The Empress was really too much. When it came to relationships she was so hesitant and wishy-washy. She was not straightforward and decisive at all. He had already made it so obvious in his dream, but she still pretended to be confused until the end. He was the Empress. Could it be that he should be the first to speak about this kind of thing? Ao Run had said something that was right. If you liked someone you should fight for it. Only by fighting for it would you have a chance. The Empress obviously didn't take this advice to heart. However, this kind of thing couldn't be rushed. Li Mu planned to take a few days off and give her the cold shoulder first. He would see if she was anxious when the time came. He wasn't in a hurry to woo the Empress. The matters at home were more troublesome. He had already slept in the study for several days. As the first wife of the Li family, Lu Hanyan was very dissatisfied with the voices of the common people. Every time Li Mu wanted to coax her, he was rejected at the door by her. This couldn't go on. Just as Li Mu was thinking about this matter in the Li residence, Li Qing said to Lu Hanyan, "Sister's anger has almost subsided. Don't tell me you're still planning to let him sleep in the study tonight?" Lu Hanyan glanced at Xiao Bai and said indifferently, "I think he's sleeping very comfortably in the study. Maybe he's already so happy that he doesn't want to go home. If he still doesn't take the initiative to come over today, he'll have to sleep in the study for the rest of the month." Xiao Bai, who was practicing magic, moved her ears and quietly slipped out. Not long after, in the Chang'e Palace, Li Mu asked in surprise, "She really said that?" Xiao Bai nodded and said, "Benefactor, you'd better go and find Sister Lu tonight. Otherwise you'll have to sleep in the study for the rest of the month." Li Mu picked her up and spun her around. He said, "Please Xiao Bai. From now on you'll stay undercover by their side. If there's any news, report to me at any time." Xiao Bai smiled and said, "Don't worry. I'll always be on Benefactor's side." Only when she lowered her head did a trace of disappointment flash through her eyes. Actually, she preferred her benefactor to sleep in the study. This was because only when he slept in the study did he completely belong to her. However, she also knew that her benefactor didn't belong to her alone. As long as the other two sisters were happy and her benefactor was happy, she would also be happy. It was nighttime. Li Mu pushed open the door to Lu Hanyan's room. She was reading when she glanced at Li Mu and asked, "What's wrong? You're finally willing to sleep on the bed in the study today?" Li Mu sat next to her and said, "The bed in the study is too hard. It's more comfortable to sleep here." Lu Hanyan said, "Although the bed in the study is hard, Xiao Bai's body is soft." Li Mu hugged her and said, "Don't be angry. That's just the nonsense of the commoners. I can't abandon you all to become His Majesty's Empress. Even if I agreed, His Majesty wouldn't agree. If you want to blame someone, blame me. Don't blame His Majesty." Lu Hanyan rolled her eyes at him and said, "His Majesty even plans to give us such a precious imperial qi. Why would I blame His Majesty? It's all your fault. While I wasn't here you went around fooling around. Even His Majesty fell into your trap. And that fox from the Yao Kingdom, those two nieces and that big sister Su. How come I haven't seen you mention her in a long time? Oh right, and that dragon you brought back," Li Mu said indignantly. "You're framing me. What could have happened between me and Qing Exin? I swear to the heavens that there's nothing between us. Nothing happened at all. Then what about the others?" Lu Hanyan looked at Li Mu and said angrily, "You're really hesitating." She bit Li Mu's chest and threw him onto the bed. Not long after, the candlelight in the room flickered violently and finally went out. The next day noon. In Chang'e Palace, Zhou Yi sat on the dragon throne and looked outside countless times. Finally she couldn't help but ask, When Li Mu left yesterday, did he say anything? Mr. May said, no, but he hasn't come yet. He probably won't come in the morning. Zhou Yi stood up and planned to go to the Li residence, but she quickly sat down again. Because of what happened on the streets of Chengdu last time, she didn't know how to face Lu Hanyan. After thinking about it, she dismissed the idea of going to the Li residence. In the Li residence, Li Mu didn't get up until the sun was high in the sky. In fact, he planned to sleep a little longer, but the constantly vibrating sound transmission instrument forced him to get up. At first he thought it was Ting Xen calling, but after finding the source he realized that this time, it was the Fulu School's sound transmission instrument. It was used by Hyun Jinko to contact him. Li Mu injected his magic power and asked, "Senior brother, what's the matter?" In the instrument, Hyun Jinko's voice was a little heavy. He said, "Junior brother, you need to go back to Ancestral Court immediately. Remember to bring Qing and Marshal niece Hanyan along." Chapter 522. Li Mu had never seen Xianxia speak in such a solemn tone. Hearing this, he also became serious and asked, "Senior brother, what happened?" Xianxia said briefly, "The two uncle masters are nearing the end of their lifespans and have returned to the Ancestral Court." Xianxia's short sentence had already conveyed a lot of information. Li Mu said in a deep voice, "I understand, we will leave immediately." After putting away the sound transmission Dharma artifact, Li Mu had a complicated expression and sighed softly. Ever since Yuzhen Zi advanced to the 7th realm, the Fulu School had 4 7th realm powerhouses for a short period of time. 2 of the Grand Elders had left the sect decades ago and had been wandering outside, searching for opportunities to break through. It seemed that they hadn't found that opportunity these days. As disciples of the Fulu School, Li Mu, Lu Hanyan, and Li Qing explained the situation. The 3 of them didn't delay and immediately set off for the northern region with Zhongling Baiyun Mountain, the ancestral court of Fulu School. In the Dao Palace of the main peak, all the elders, including the sect master, gathered. They couldn't hide their heavy expressions. Hyun Jinko was silent for a moment and asked, "Is there no other way? Can't the ancestral court gather the materials for a single heavenly secret talisman?" Sect Master Xianxia shook his head and said, "The only heavenly secret talisman made of materials has already been used on Uncle Master Fu Daozi." Dan Xiaoping's first seat Dan Yangzi thought for a moment and said, "I will go to the Pill Cauldron sect. They don't lack spirit herbs. I might be able to gather 2 if I use Fulu to exchange with them." Xianxia continued to shake his head and said, "I have already asked Senior Sister Wuchen. Half a month ago the Pill Cauldron sect failed to refine 2 important pills. They also lack spirit herbs. Moreover, the 2 uncle masters know that they have no hope of advancing, so they don't want to waste any more materials." As his voice fell, the atmosphere in the hall fell silent for a long time. The death of the 2 grand elders was undoubtedly a huge blow to the Fulu School. It would greatly reduce the strength of the sect. The elders present also suffered a heavy blow to their hearts. He had cultivated bitterly all his life in order to achieve immortality, but in the end he still couldn't avoid dust to dust and dust to dust. Wouldn't the 2 grand elders be their future selves as well? At this time 3 figures rushed in from outside the palace. Xianxia looked at Li Mu, Li Qing and Lu Hanyan and said, "You're here. The 2 martial uncles wanted to see you before they died." Li Mu asked straightforwardly, "Can't we use the heavenly secret talisman to stall for time?" Xianxia shook his head. "We don't have enough materials. Moreover, the talisman of heavenly secrets is very useful for those at the 6th realm. However, with the cultivation of the 2 uncle masters, it can only extend their lifespans by 3 years at most. The 2 uncle masters are unwilling to waste resources. For cultivators at the 7th realm, it was very likely that they would go into seclusion for more than 2 years. 2 years passed in the blink of an eye. At that time they still couldn't avoid the fate of death. Li Mu, I can think of a way to procure the materials. 3 years is 3 years. There's no need. 2 figures floated in from outside the hall. The 2 old men in linen clothes gazed at Li Mu's group of 3 with gratification in their eyes as they said, "Not bad. Even though the 2 of us old fellows are about to die soon, the talisman sect still has a future." Looking at the 2 old men, the peak masters cupped their hands. Martial uncles. This was the first time Li Mu saw the 2 grand elders of the Fulu School. Their auras weren't strong and they looked like old men who were about to die. However, their eyes were extremely clear without any turbidity. Li Mu and the other two cupped their hands and bowed. "Greetings, martial uncles." The old man on the left looked at Li Mu and his praise grew. He said, "Since ancient times, those who walked the path of psychokinesis were all people with great perseverance. Junior brother Fu Daozi has taken in a good disciple. In the next 100 years the Fulu school will depend on you." Li Mu asked, "How many years do you two martial uncles have left?" Xianxia sighed and said, "Martial uncles Tianyangzi and Tianqingzi are twin brothers. Their lifespans are close to 360 years. Now they only have 2 years left." Li Mu, 2 years plus 3 years is 5 years. 5 years ago I hadn't cultivated yet. Now I'm only one step away from the 6th realm. Maybe in these 5 years, you two martial uncles have a chance to advance." Tianyangzi smiled and said, "We know our own cultivation better than anyone else. Not to mention 5 years, even if you give us another 50 years, we won't be able to touch the threshold of the path integration realm. In the entire Zhou province, only the Empress of the Great Zhou has a chance to advance to this realm in her lifetime." He glanced at Li Mu and the other heads and said, 360 years, 180 years. We've lived long enough. In the next 2 years, we'll record our lifelong understanding of talisman Dao and cultivation for our descendants. Our cultivation can help 2 disciples in the creation realm advance to Zhou Xian. You can also refine our corpses into corpses to enhance the strength of the sect and guard against the invasion of the devil path. In the silence of the crowd, the two of them floated away. Not long after, Xianxia called Li Mu to a side hall and said, "Once you two martial uncles die, the strength of the sect will be greatly reduced. The devil path won't let go of such an opportunity. For hundreds of years, the devil path has attacked Mount Baiyun several times for this reason." Li Mu moved Zhong Ling out of the demon emperor's space and stretched out his hand. The shrunken Dao bell floated in his palm. He said to Xianxia, "Zhong Ling has already transformed. I'll leave the body of the bell on Mount Baiyun. It's enough to deal with the devil path. If the devil path really makes a move, the Great Zhou court won't just stand by and watch." Xianxia shook his head and said, "Uncle Masters, you still have 2 years left in your lifespan. Keep junior brother Dao Zhong to protect yourself first. Your safety is more important. I summoned you back to the mountain this time for another important matter." He looked at Li Mu and said, "According to past practice, before the elders of the sect die, they will pass on their lifetime's cultivation to a core disciple. Martial uncle's cultivation can allow 2 5th realm disciples to advance to the 6th realm. They want to choose between you and the 2 martial nephews. What do you think?" For a large sect, this was a very important inheritance. Before the sect's experts died, they would leave everything to the younger disciples. This was to preserve the sect's strength to the greatest extent and ensure that the inheritance would not be severed. Li Mu didn't answer. He only said, "Let's use the Tianji talisman to extend the lifespan of martial uncles for as long as possible. What if a miracle happens during this period?" Xianxia sighed and said, "The sect's resources are already not enough to write a saint-level Fulu." Li Mu said, "Senior martial brother, you don't have to worry about the materials. I'll take care of it." Xianxia asked, "How can you take care of it?" Saint-level Fulu was extremely precious. Even with the entire Fulu school's resources, it was still difficult to gather them. How could he compare to the entire Fulu school by himself? Li Mu took out the spirit snail and inserted his magic power. Before he could speak, the Empress's voice came from the other side. "Where have you been? You haven't come to Changel Palace for 2 days. You didn't even say hello." Li Mu said, "Something urgent happened in the sect. I brought my wife to Mount Baiyun." Zhou Yi asked, "When will you be back?" Li Mu said, "I'm not sure at the moment. There's something I'd like to ask for your Majesty's help with." Zhou Yi said, "What is it? Speak." Li Mu said straightforwardly, "There are 2 grand elders in the sect who are nearing the end of their lifespan. I'd like to refine 2 Tianji talismans." Before he could finish, Zhou Yi said, "The Imperial Court probably only has enough materials for 1 Tianji talisman. I'll have the apricot guard send it to you immediately." Hearing the urgency of the situation, the Empress hung up the spirit snail and prepared the materials Li Mu needed. Beside Li Mu, Xianxia opened his mouth and said, "That's rude of me. I haven't thanked your Majesty yet." Li Mu waved his hand and said, We're family. There's no need to thank me. Xianxia pondered for a while but still couldn't understand what Li Mu meant by family. Then he thought of something more important and said, the sect still has some talisman liquid. I'll go to the other 5 sects personally. I should be able to gather the materials for the other Tianji talisman. Li Mu shook his head and said, there's no need. We don't need to ask outsiders for help. He took out another talisman and inserted his magic power. Soon, Phantom Princess's voice came from it. The sun has risen from the west. You're actually looking for me? Li Mu said embarrassedly, I have something I need your help with. I need some high-grade spirit medicine, Phantom Princess said calmly. Will you come and get it yourself or should I have someone send it to you? Li Mu thought for a moment and said, I'll go get it myself. After putting away the talisman, Xianxia looked at him and asked, who's on the other side? Li Mu said, the Queen of the Thousand Fox Kingdom. He said there was no need to ask outsiders for help. Xianxia thought for a moment and asked with uncertainty, the Queen of the Thousand Fox Kingdom is your wife? Chapter 523. After thinking for a long time, Xianxia looked at Li Mu and said solemnly, how about I give up my position earlier? I believe that under your leadership Fu School will become better and better. Li Mu waved his hand and said, my cultivation is low and not enough to convince the others. Senior brother, you should be the headmaster for now. As a member of the Fu School, the Fu School had treated him well and had even given him the treasure of the school. Even if he had to spend a lot of precious resources and could only help the 2 Taishang elders live for another 3 years, Li Mu would not hesitate. Although asking the Empress and Phantom Princess for help was a bit of a freeloader, if the Empress was willing, Li Mu could be hers and there was no need to be so calculative. As for Phantom Princess, Li Mu had helped her so many times, so it would not be too much for her to help Li Mu once, right? The Empress said that after the materials were gathered, she would have Mr. Mei send it over. Li Mu did not think about it earlier and only now realized that he needed the help of a level 7 primordial spirit to write the Fu. If Mr. Mei sent it over, wouldn't he be possessed by Xianxia again? If he had a choice, of course he would want the Empress to possess him. So Li Mu took out the spirit snail again and told the Empress that there was no need to trouble Mr. Mei to make another trip. He would go back to Shen Du to write the talisman himself. Before that he had to go to the Yao Kingdom. Lu Hanyan and Li Qing stayed in the sect for the time being. Although the Empress had already reserved the Emperor's qi for them, not everyone could be like the Empress, who could rely on the Emperor's qi to reach level 7 when they were only level 5. Before her, the Shao royal clan had used large amounts of resources to forcefully push the Emperor or the Crown Prince to the 6th realm for safety reasons. Only then would they begin to inherit the Emperor's qi. The 2 Grand Supreme Elders' 7th realm cultivations were so majestic that even if only a tenth of their qi remained, they could still forcefully push the creation realm cultivator to the see-through realm. In the history of Fulu School, quite a few heads had been promoted this way. Although the 2 Grand Shang elders had the intention of passing on their power to Lu Hanyan and Li Qing, Li Mu still did his best to do what he should do as a disciple of the Fulu School. The North County was not far from the Demon Nation. After a few hours, Li Mu had already appeared in the Thousand Fox Nation. Phantom Princess had already told Fox 6 to prepare the herbs that Li Mu needed. She asked Li Mu, is this enough? If it's not enough, you can go to the treasury and pick. Enough. Li Mu waved his big sleeve and the pile of spirit herbs disappeared on the spot. He looked at Illusion Princess and said, thank you. Huanji rolled her eyes and said, why are you being so polite with me? Li Mu said, these things are very important to me. It's all thanks to you. Continue with your work. I'll go back first. Before he could fly up, Illusion Princess grabbed his wrist. She frowned and looked at him. She said, you want to leave after taking things? How can there be someone like you? Also, it's already dark. Can't you stay for a night before leaving? Li Mu thought about it carefully and realized that it was not very good for him to do this. After taking such precious things, what was the difference between saying thank you and those scumbags who took a girl's body and ran away? He looked at the completely dark sky and said, then I'll sleep for a night. It was Li Mu's room in the harem. Phantom Princess had Fox 6 bring in a few dishes. Li Mu had not eaten all day, but just as he picked up his chopsticks, the Empress's spirit snail vibrated again. Li Mu made a shushing gesture to Phantom Princess and then picked up the spirit snail. The Empress asked from the other side, have you eaten? Just this one sentence showed that their relationship was not the same as before. The Empress used to use the spirit snail to summon him, and she would always find some excuse, such as discussing national affairs or giving advice on cultivation. But now she was so direct. With the Empress's personality, what was the difference between, "Have you eaten," and "I miss you"? It seemed that his strategy for the Empress was starting to work. Li Mu smiled and said, "I'm eating." Phantom Princess suddenly felt that her throat was uncomfortable again. She covered her mouth and coughed a few times. Puff. The Empress's voice changed immediately. "Didn't you say that something happened at Fulu School and you secretly went to see that fox spirit again?" Li Mu explained, "Your Majesty misunderstood. I only came to Thousand Fox Country to get some spirit medicine to make the talisman liquid for the talisman of Tianji. Tomorrow morning I will leave for Shendu." Zhou Yi whispered, "I didn't give you enough. You still need to find that fox." Phantom Princess snorted and said, "Unfortunately I don't have anything here, but I have a lot of spirit medicine. If you don't have any more spirit medicine, come find me." Zhou Yi directly asked Li Mu, "When is that fox leaving? I want to talk to you alone." Phantom Princess said unhappily, "You're the one who interrupted our meal. You should be the one leaving." Li Mu was in a dilemma. He had taken both the Empress and Phantom Princess's gifts, so no matter which one he sided with, he would be letting the other down. He put down his chopsticks and said, "I have been running around for 2 days. I want to rest. Phantom Princess, you can go back first." Her Majesty should rest early too. Phantom Princess heard this and could only leave. After she left, Li Mu took out the spirit snail again and whispered, "Your Majesty." She left. Zhou Yi said unhappily, "I told you to stop looking for that fox. You didn't listen to me. She doesn't have good intentions towards you." Li Mu said, "Your Majesty, don't worry. I will be careful." Without Phantom Princess's interruption, Li Mu and Queen's conversation became more casual. They talked about how they would live in seclusion in the fields and grow vegetables. At this time, Li Mu did not notice that compared to the last time he slept here, there was an extra decorative clam shell at the head of his bed. At the head of Phantom Princess's bed, there was also a clam shell that looked exactly the same. At this moment she was sitting at the bedside and listening to the sound coming from the clam shell. However, the more she listened, the deeper her frown became. Li Mu and Zhou Xian had actually decided to grow flowers and vegetables together in the future. What was their relationship? Could it be that Zhou Xian had already obtained the advantage of being in a favorable position and had gotten Li Mu first? The more she thought about it, the angrier she got. When there was no sound coming from the clam shell, she immediately went back to the harem. Li Mu had just finished chatting with the Empress and was about to eat when Phantom Princess pushed the door open again. The Empress probably wouldn't call again tonight. Li Mu looked at her and asked, "Do you want to eat together?" Phantom Princess sat down across from Li Mu and asked in a low voice, "Tell me honestly, what are your thoughts towards Zhou Yi?" Li Mu thought for a long time and didn't plan to lie to her. He said, "It's the thought of growing feelings over time." Phantom Princess said angrily, "How can you face your wife?" Li Mu said, "My wife has already agreed." "What?" Phantom Princess was shocked. "Lu Hanyan agreed to the matter between you and Zhou Yi. Is she crazy?" Li Mu didn't answer and Phantom Princess didn't need him to answer. She looked at Li Mu and asked, "You have feelings for Zhou Yi over time. Then what are your feelings for me? You know that the Heavenly Fox clan will repay kindness, but you are still so good to me. You have given me a favor that I can't repay in my lifetime. What am I in your heart?" Phantom Princess's expression was serious. Li Mu couldn't beat around the bush like before. The premise of growing feelings over time was to spend time with her. He and Phantom Princess didn't have long experiences together. During the longest time they spent together, he was the little snake and she was Lord Phantom Princess. No matter if it was Li Mu or her, they didn't have any feelings for each other. Now the relationship between the two of them was that of the little snake and Lord Phantom Princess, that of the state preceptor and the queen, that of the six-tailed celestial fox and her benefactor. Their different identities were intertwined, and even Li Mu himself did not know what their relationship was. Phantom Princess naturally had an important place in his heart. But how important was it? Li Mu couldn't explain it with words. Li Mu walked to her side, grabbed her hand and placed it on his chest. He said, "I don't know either. Why don't you feel it for yourself?" Since he couldn't describe it with words, he would let her feel it for herself. Phantom Princess placed her hand on Li Mu's chest. She could clearly feel his emotions. She didn't know how to describe it. The only thing she knew was that she was very important in Li Mu's heart. She grabbed Li Mu's hand and placed it on her chest. She said, "Feel it too." Other than the fullness, Li Mu also felt a love that could drown him. This was Phantom Princess's feelings for him. Phantom Princess looked at Li Mu and said, "You also like me, but it's not as deep as I like you. But it's okay. You'll know how good I am in the future." She sat down again and took out a bottle of wine from the storage space. She poured a cup for Li Mu and herself. She said, "I'm very happy tonight. Drink with me." Chapter 524. Who would reject the reasonable request of a woman who was full of love for him? Moreover, it was just a small matter like drinking with her. Li Mu raised the cup, and when he brought it to his mouth, he hesitated for a moment. With Huanji's style, Li Mu was not sure if there was anything added to the wine. Huanji saw the slight change in his expression and said, "What, are you afraid that I'll poison it?" She drank all the wine in her cup and then tilted the cup down. Not a single drop of wine leaked out. Li Mu did not argue and drank all the wine in one gulp. It was strange that the wine did not taste like alcohol at all. Instead, it tasted sweet. Could it be a new type of sweet wine from the Yao Kingdom? At this time, Huanji looked at Li Mu and said, "At the beginning I hated you very much. I have never been bullied like this in my life. I told my father to put a bounty on you and swore that I would repay you 100 times the humiliation I suffered from you," Li Mu explained. "That time, you provoked me first." "Then what about the White Emperor's cave?" Huanji took a deep breath and continued, "You, a man, brought people from the 6 Dao sects to bully a woman like me. You stole so many things from me and even stole the Demon Emperor's heavenly book." Li Mu said, "At that time we were still enemies. Of course I would not be merciful to my enemies. Later on, didn't I give you the heavenly book?" Huanji ignored Li Mu and continued, "Later on something happened to my father and brother. Me and Fox 6 were hunted down. It was you who saved us. You killed Zhou Xian and took back the 1,000 Fox Kingdom. You resisted the attacks of the Demon Sect and the Celestial Wolf Tribe. At that time I knew that other than giving myself to you, I would never be able to repay your kindness in this life." Li Mu felt that his mouth was dry. It was not because of Huanji's sudden confession, but because he was really thirsty and his body was hot. He poured another cup of wine and chilled it with his magic power. Then he drank all the wine in one gulp, hoping to sober himself up. Phantom Princess was still rambling. She took off her shirt and looked at Li Mu. "Don't you feel hot wearing so much?" 1,000 Fox Country was in the middle of a mountain range and the temperature was just right. With Li Mu and Huanji's cultivation, they were already immune to both heat and cold, so how could they feel the heat? He immediately realized where the problem was. He pointed at the jug and said to Huanji, "This wine." Huanji looked at him with her charming eyes and asked, "Wine? What wine? Where is the wine?" Li Mu was stunned. "Then what's in the pot?" Huanji's face turned red as she lowered her voice and said, "This is our Fox Clan's acacia water. We drink it on the night of the Heavenly Fox Clan's wedding. Every time you come, you leave quickly. I don't have time to develop feelings for you, so I can only use this method." Li Mu was shocked. He lowered his head and chanted, "If the heart is as clear as ice, the sky will collapse. If the heart is as clear as ice, the sky will collapse." After chanting the clear heart chant, his heart quickly calmed down. However, his body was still unbearably hot. This chant had a miraculous effect on the heart, but it had no effect on the body. This heat and desire came from the depths of his body. Huanji took off her second layer of clothes and slowly walked towards Li Mu. She asked, "Since you also like me, why are you still resisting?" Li Mu clenched his teeth and said, "Feelings need to be cultivated." Huanji gently placed her hand on his chest and said, "It's not too late to cultivate in the future." Li Mu used his magic power to resist the desire in his heart. Huanji looked at him for a while and said, "I forgot to remind you. The more you use your magic power to resist, the faster the medicine will melt in your body. Feel it now, isn't your body soft?" She used her magic power that was far stronger than Li Mu's to push him onto the bed. She bit his ear and said with a seductive voice, "Just do it." Inside the palace on the roof of a certain hall, Hulu murmured, "Lord Huanji should succeed. That's the joyous union pill, no one below the upper realm can resist it." Hujiu didn't say anything. She grabbed the wine jar with one hand and drank it in one gulp. Some people were happy while others were sad. Tonight was Lord Huanji's big day. Tonight, Thousand Fox Country had another sad person. Early in the morning, Li Mu woke up from the soft bed. Huanji was already awake. She sat on the bed and combed her long hair. She looked back at Li Mu and said, "Don't worry, I will be responsible for you. As long as you are willing, you can become my empress now." Ouch. Before she finished speaking, she was pulled onto the bed. Li Mu's face darkened. He clenched his teeth and said, "Fox demon, you asked for it." Thousand Fox Country, Imperial Palace Hall. The demon officials who had been waiting for a long time didn't see Her Majesty the Queen, but only Commander Hu Lu. Hu Lu slowly walked into the hall and said to the dozens of demon officials, "The Queen won't have morning court today. Disperse." Shendu Changel Palace. It had been a few days since Li Mu returned to Shendu. He brought back the materials for the second Tianji talisman from Thousand Fox Country. The two talismans that he and the Queen worked together to draw had also been taken back to Baiyun Mountain by Hyun Jingko. Lu Hanyan and Li Qing hadn't returned yet. Before the two grand elders died, they would pass on their life's knowledge and comprehension to the inner disciples. Other than Li Mu, all the core disciples of Fulu School had been summoned back to the mountain. Li Mu sat below the Empress in his exclusive seat. He had already been reading a memorial for almost an hour. It wasn't that he had encountered a difficult decision, but he still couldn't accept that Huanji had forced him to lose his virginity. The Queen had warned him many times to be careful of Huanji, but Li Mu didn't take it to heart. It was too late to say anything now. He hadn't made any substantial progress with the Queen, but he had already done it with Huanji. Li Mu hadn't told Lu Hanyan and Li Qing about this yet, because it was embarrassing. The biggest problem now wasn't Lu Hanyan and Li Qing. If the Queen knew about this, the consequences would be unimaginable. She and Huanji were like fire and water. She would definitely think that Li Mu had betrayed her. Li Mu secretly glanced at the Queen and lowered his head to continue reading the memorial. Zhou Yi also glanced at Li Mu and asked, "How did your cultivation level increase again?" "Were you?" Li Mu immediately stood up and said, "I didn't betray your majesty. The Grand Elder of Fulu School imparted his power to me." Zhou Yi finished speaking and looked at Li Mu again. "What did you say you betrayed?" Li Mu slowly sat down and lowered his head. "Nothing." Zhou Yi frowned and said, "I've already noticed. After returning from Thousand Fox Country, you've been absent-minded. Is that fox so attractive to you?" Li Mu's expression didn't reveal anything. He said seriously, "Your Majesty, you've misunderstood. I was just thinking that reality is so cruel. Even a 7th Realm Grand Elder can't avoid reaching the end of his lifespan." Zhou Yi said, "What's there to think about? Everyone will die one day. 180 years is already a lot. A meaningful decade is better than a century." Li Mu said slowly, "Although that's the case, isn't cultivation for longevity? Most cultivators fight for their lives and only live a few years longer than normal people. What kind of cultivation is this?" Zhou Yi didn't agree with Li Mu's words. He said calmly, "Longevity isn't necessarily a good thing. If I had to choose, as long as I can spend my mortal life with the person I love, I'd rather not have a long lifespan." Li Mu said, "I think so too." The two looked at each other. Li Mu's expression was calm. Zhou Yi quickly looked away. Li Mu sighed. They were both rulers of a country. If the Queen had half the initiative of Huan Jiling, or would have a brother or sister by now. Chapter 525. After leaving Changel Palace, Li Mu went to the consecration department to take a look. Before he left, two high consecrators stopped Li Mu and asked, "Lord Li, there were two strange phenomena in the palace a few days ago. What was that?" Li Mu answered honestly, "It was a strange phenomenon born from the talisman of heavenly secrets." The two rubbed their hands and asked nervously, "The two talismans of heavenly secrets?" Li Mu nodded and said, "That's right. They are for you. Do a good job here. When the time comes, the two talismans of heavenly secrets will be in your hands." Hearing this, the two heaved a sigh of relief and said solemnly, "Don't worry, Lord Li, don't worry, Her Majesty. We will do our best and love our job." There were still a few years before the two high consecrators' talismans of heavenly secrets were handed over. The Great Zhou was vast and rich in resources. A few years was enough for the imperial court to gather a few more materials, so there was no need to worry. For these high-level cultivators, the biggest enemy was their lifespan. Fu Daozi and Sang Gu were in a hurry to take in disciples because they wanted to pass down their mantle and resolve their regrets before their lifespan ran out. After cultivating to the 7th realm, one's lifespan was only 180 years. Li Mu also felt that it was too short. However, the Empress was right. It was much more meaningful to spend the rest of one's life with one's loved one than to cultivate bitterly for a few years and then come out of seclusion. Lu Hanyan and Li Qing were not here. There were only Wan, Xiaobai and a few maids at home. Li Mu usually did not have much time to accompany them alone. Today he took the initiative to take them out for a stroll. He owed Xiaobai the most. As his spy, Xiaobai was so sensible that Li Mu's heart ached. She often suffered grievances herself and delivered important information for him. In the end, Li Mu still had another fox by his side. Xiaobai still did not know. On the streets of Xindu, Li Mu was being held by the girls. Xiaobai and Wan were chatting along the way. Suddenly, Li Mu noticed that Wan stopped in her tracks and stopped talking. Li Mu tilted his head and was about to ask her what was wrong when he noticed that Wan was looking in a certain direction on the street. Her face was a little pale. Li Mu followed her gaze and saw a beggar couple begging on the street. The people of Xindu were kind and charitable. Occasionally, passers-by would take out 1 or 2 copper coins and put them in their bowls. Wan stared at the beggar couple with tears in her eyes. Li Mu seemed to have realized something. He silently took Wan's hand and held it tightly. The beggar couple begged for dozens of copper coins and walked into a secluded alley. The beggar couple was clearly very familiar with this alley. After more than 10 turns, they finally came to a dilapidated courtyard. The walls of the courtyard were mottled and half-collapsed. The courtyard was also overgrown with weeds. Clearly no one had lived here for a long time. Only some homeless beggars in Xindu would use this place as a temporary residence. The two walked in through the collapsed wall. In the courtyard, a skinny young man in tattered clothes took the bowls from their hands. He poured the copper coins into his clothes and curled his lips. He said, "They say that the people of Xindu are generous, but this is all there is to it. Took us so long to get this much." The woman said, "It's already quite a lot to get this in 2 hours. Don't gamble with it." The young man waved his hand and said, I know. I'll go out for a while. You can go to another place. Xindu is so big it's enough for us to curry favor for a few months." Watching the young man leave, the man said, "I told you not to give the money to him. He went to gamble and lost it again." The woman waved her hand and said, "If it's gone, then go ask for more. The people here are so generous, we're not afraid of not getting enough. We only have 1 son and we'll need him to send us off in the future." The man sighed and didn't say anything else. At this time, the woman said with some regret, "We shouldn't have lost that useless thing. If we had kept him until now, he would have been able to be sold for a high price, at least 100 taels. The man waved his hand and said, "Let's not talk about this. While it's still early, we can still get some more money today." The two walked out of the abandoned courtyard and walked back to the main street. At the entrance of the courtyard, 3 figures that they couldn't see stood there. Wan's face was pale and her eyes were empty. More than 10 years ago she was abandoned once. More than 10 years later she was reunited with her biological parents. More than 10 years later, the wound in her heart that had almost healed was torn open again. Li Mu and Lu Hanyan had always doted on Wan like a child and never let her come into contact with cruel things. Li Mu couldn't imagine how much pain her biological parents had caused her. He took a deep breath and pulled Wan into his arms. He said, "Don't forget you still have me in Mississippi." Xiaobai also hugged her from behind and said, Me too. We'll always be by your side." On a street somewhere in Xindu. "Everyone, please do a good deed. Give us a copper coin to eat. Do a good deed, do a good deed." A beggar couple was begging on the street. Beggars were rare on the streets of Xindu. There were opportunities everywhere. As long as they worked hard, they wouldn't have to beg on the street. Although the people felt that they were reaping without sowing, there would still be people who would be sympathetic and reward them with some money. The couple stood on the street and were whispering. The people on this street weren't as generous as the people on the previous street. 3 figures stopped in front of them. Standing in the middle was a man, and on either side of him was a beautiful young lady. The 3 of them were dressed luxuriously and their auras were extraordinary. Such people were either rich or noble, and the 2 of them subconsciously bowed. The girl with an oval face on the right took out a banknote from her sleeve and put it in their bowl. Her gaze lingered on the beggar couple's faces for a long time. Then she turned and left, never looking back. The two of them didn't dare to look at the girl from the beginning to the end. Their eyes were fixed on the banknote of 100 taels in the bowl. Their throats moved and they swallowed hard. Did I see wrongly? This is 100 taels. Although they heard that the people of Shindu were generous, they didn't expect that someone would be so generous as to give 100 taels to beggars. After coming back to her senses, the woman grabbed the banknote and hid it in her sleeve. Then the two of them knelt down in front of the three figures who were already far away. They said joyfully, "Thank you, young master. Thank you, young miss." After the three of them walked past them, they didn't turn back to look at them. Not long after Li Mu, Wan, and Xiao Bai returned home, Mr. Mei came to invite them to the palace. The empress wanted them to eat in the palace today. Wan had always been very enthusiastic about eating in the palace. However, today she only took the plate of vegetables in front of her. She only ate a few mouthfuls of the rice that she usually ate with 3 bowls. Only Xianxia ate happily. Seeing that Wan didn't eat much, he took the initiative to take her bowl and said, "You don't like rice? I'll help you eat." The empress obviously also noticed Wan's abnormality. After eating, she asked Li Mu to stay in Changle Palace and asked, "What's wrong with Wan? Did you bully her?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "Wan met her parents in Shindu today." Zhou Yi asked doubtfully, "Shouldn't she be happy about this?" Li Mu told her what happened today. Zhou Yi suddenly stood up and said angrily, "How can there be such parents in this world?" Li Mu looked at her. The empress's parents weren't much better than Wan's parents. The empress, who felt sorry for Wan, went to comfort her. Before she left, she told Li Mu to let Xianxia go. She usually stayed in Shindu and didn't go out. There was no use in keeping this dragon in the palace. There was indeed no use in keeping him. The only use was that after he entered the palace, the empress never left behind 3 meals a day. Li Mu looked at the little female dragon who was still sitting at the table and said, "You can go back to the South Sea." Xianxia raised his head. His mouth was still stuffed with food and he looked at Li Mu with a doubtful gaze. Li Mu said, "Her Majesty has pardoned your crime. You can go back." Xianxia swallowed the bulging food in his mouth and then said, "I can't go back. Our dragon race's promise is worth 1,000 gold. We said 3 years and it's 3 years. Not a day less." Chapter 526. Li Mu didn't want to leave, so he didn't force her. He only warned her, "You can eat whatever you want from now on, but don't steal Wan's food. Otherwise I'll send you to the border to guard South Lake. You can eat the fish and prawns in the lake." Seeing her nod, Li Mu turned and left. Wan stayed in the palace for the time being. Xiao Bai thought of ways to make her happy. Li Mu left the palace and came to the consecration department. 2 great consecrators came out to welcome him personally and asked, "Lord Li, do you have any orders?" Li Mu waved his sleeves and an image appeared in the air. There were 3 figures in the image. Li Mu looked at them and said, "Send someone to Peace Square. Find these 3 beggars and send them out of the divine capital. I don't want to see them in the divine capital for the rest of my life." 15 minutes later. High up in the sky of the central region, a beggar couple and their son curled up in the corner of the flying boat. They were shocked and shivering. Great Consecrator Qin stood at the bow of the boat with a calm expression. Lord Li said he didn't want to see them in the divine capital for the rest of his life. Naturally, he would send them as far away as possible. He looked back at the 3 of them and said, "The 3 of you remember, don't step into the central region for the rest of your life. Otherwise," he didn't finish his sentence. The 3 people at the end of the boat also repeatedly kowtowed and promised. Everything that happened today was too inconceivable for them. They were already scared out of their wits and didn't even dare to ask a single question. Great Consecrator Qin didn't know what happened. He looked at the 3 of them and calculated with his fingers. He could only calculate that the 3 of them had missed a great opportunity. This opportunity was most likely related to Lord Li. If they could form a good relationship with Lord Li, even if these 3 beggars didn't have great power for the rest of their lives, they could still be very rich. Unfortunately, they didn't know what they had done to cause Lord Li to hate them so much, so they missed this opportunity. Divine capital. It had been a few days since that incident, but Wan was still unhappy. In the past few days she had been silent and didn't eat much. Li Mu was very worried when he saw her. He had been thinking for a long time, but he still couldn't think of a good way to help Wan Wan out of this state. At this time, a sound transmission magic treasure in the storage space vibrated. After Li Mu inserted his magic power, he asked, "Senior brother, what's the matter?" Xianxia's voice came from the sound transmission magic treasure. Half a month later, Xuanzong of the East Sea will be holding a Daoist exchange meeting. At that time, the 6 sects of Taoism will all participate. Junior brother, do you want to take a look and increase your knowledge? Li Mu was still worried about Wan Wan. He was about to refuse when he suddenly thought of something and said, "Okay then." Although he had already ordered people to chase that family out of Fairy's capital so that Wan Wan wouldn't be reminded of sad memories, the current Fairy's capital was a sad place for her. It was hard for her to be happy if she stayed here for a long time. He might as well take this opportunity to take them out for a walk. It would also be a good chance for Wan Wan to relax. After that, Li Mu learned about the details of this exchange meeting from Xianxia. The Daoist exchange meeting was organized by the number 1 sect of Taoism, Xuanzong. It was held once every 5 years. At the beginning, the purpose was for Taoism cultivators to exchange their cultivation experiences and explore the mysteries of cultivation. As the leaders of Taoism, the 6 sects of Taoism would also have the powerhouses of their sects give lectures during the exchange meeting. They would selflessly contribute knowledge of weapon forging, alchemy, talisman writing, and so on. Of course, no one would reveal their cultivation experiences. The core secrets of the 6 sects were also tightly guarded and never leaked. Although it was called an exchange meeting, it was actually not very helpful for cultivation. This was for high-level cultivators. 4 low-level cultivators who had just entered the path of cultivation, especially those who didn't belong to any sects and were exploring alone. This kind of exchange meeting was a golden opportunity that could only be encountered by chance. The basic knowledge that the big sects disdained was also precious to them. The real reason why the 6 sects participated in the exchange meeting was not because they could exchange their cultivation experiences, but because they could exchange resources and take what they needed. The Fulu school didn't lack Fulu, but it lacked alchemy pills and magic treasures. It was the same for the other sections. In the process of trading with each other, they could also improve their relationship. In the Changel Palace, Li Mu explained the situation to the Empress. Aoqingxin had been listening for a long time. He stood up and volunteered, "Take me with you. You can ride on me. It's more convenient and comfortable than taking the flying boat." This little female dragon who had never seen the world obviously wanted to take the opportunity to see the colorful world. However, what she said was not wrong. Riding on her was much more comfortable than taking the flying boat. Moreover, it didn't consume their own magic power. It only took a meal to fly 1,000 miles. There was another advantage to taking her. Xuanzong was on the East Sea. With her they could also see the underwater world with Wan Wan and Xiaobai. As long as Li Mu didn't go to the Demon Nation, the Empress had no objections. Moreover, the main purpose of this trip was to take Wan Wan to relax and help her resolve the knot in her heart. She approved Li Mu's leave without any hesitation. Half a month later, in the East County of the Great Zhou. Since a month ago, many cultivators had begun to gather in the East County. Xuanzong held the exchange conference every 5 years. For these individual cultivators, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. They either hoped to hear the teachings of the powerhouses from the 6 sects or wanted to exchange for some useful items for cultivation. Xuanzong was on the East Sea, nearly 1,000 miles away from the East County. Cultivators above the 4th realm could cross this distance with their magic power. For those below the 4th realm, even if they learned how to fly, their magic power couldn't sustain it. Most of them chose to travel by boat. Some merchant ships in the East County didn't waste such an opportunity. They carried these cultivators between the coast of the East County and Xuanzong. Not only could they make a lot of money, but they could also get a group of guards with powerful magic power for free to protect them from the invasion of the Wa pirates. The exchange conference was about to begin. On the East Sea there were more than 10 times more merchant ships than usual. The sun was shining brightly and the sea and sky were the same color. Several figures stood on the deck, their faces full of longing and excitement. Xuanzong, the leader of the 6 Daoist sects, was the holy land in the hearts of countless Daoist cultivators. They only had the opportunity to get close to this place during the exchange conference every 5 years. In the crowd, a middle-aged man looked to the east and murmured, "I've been in the Zhou Xian realm for 5 years. I hope I can encounter an opportunity this time and reach the transcendent realm." A young woman hugged a small bag tightly, hoping to use this precious spiritual medicine she found by chance to exchange for a protective immortal robe from the market. Another man held a broken flying sword in his hand. He breathed a sigh of relief and said, "I've finally gathered enough spiritual jades to exchange for a flying sword." On the surface of the sea, merchant ships sailed slowly. Occasionally, streams of light would streak across the sky and pass over their heads. Soon they disappeared from sight. The people on the merchant ships looked at the figures in the streams of light with envy in their eyes. Those were the true powerhouses of the cultivation world. The realm of those seniors was the goal of most of them. "Look, what's that?" Suddenly someone pointed to the sky. Everyone looked in the direction of his finger and saw a huge spirit ship sailing across the sky. There were many figures on the spirit ship. The speed of this spirit ship was much faster than their merchant ships. Soon it disappeared into the horizon. Someone who was knowledgeable immediately recognized the origin of the spirit ship. He said, "It's the spirit ship of the Northern Sect. The Northern Sect's refining technique is the best in the Daoist sections. I hope to buy a high-grade Dharma treasure from the Northern Sect in this exchange conference." In every exchange conference, other than being able to listen to the Dao lectures of powerhouses for free, the thing that these itinerant cultivators looked forward to the most was being able to exchange for Fulu pills, Dharma treasures, and other items from the 6 Daoist sects. The names Fulu School, Elixir Sect, and Northern Sect were a guarantee of quality. Everyone was on the merchant ships. Along the way, countless powerhouses flew over their heads. The light from their Dharma treasures was an eye-opener for them. Many of the youths who were participating in the exchange conference for the first time had a strange look in their eyes. At a certain moment, another ray of light appeared at the end of the horizon behind them. Under the gazes of the crowd, a huge white dragon roared from behind. Immediately, a series of exclamations erupted on the merchant ships. "Oh my God, what am I seeing? The dragon race. It's actually the dragon race. I've only seen the dragon race in books. Look, there are figures on the dragon race." When the huge dragon flew closer, they were shocked to discover that there were 3 figures standing on the huge dragon's head. From afar they should be a man and 2 women. When everyone saw that, they were all stunned. Along the way they had seen people riding swords, people riding boats, people flying in the sky, but they had never seen anyone riding a dragon. The dragon race was the most powerful and arrogant race in the world, yet it was used as a mount. Then what kind of identity and strength did the person who rode a dragon as a mount have? Flush. The huge dragon flew over their heads. When it reached a certain part of the sea, it dived back into the water and never appeared again. While the cultivators on the surface of the sea were discussing, a different kind of scenery was under the sea. The dragon race was the master of the water race. Under Ao Isen's summons, all kinds of creatures in the sea quickly gathered here. The huge whales swam slowly, the dolphins shuttled through the water, and the ferocious sharks became very obedient and swam around them. Li Mu looked at Wanwan and Xiaobai who were playing with the fishes. When he saw Wanwan's face light up with a bright smile, he heaved a long sigh of relief. Chapter 527. On the surface of the East Sea there was a gentle breeze. 4 figures emerged from the water without a single trace of water on them. Wanwan and Little White's faces were flushed. This was their first time seeing the sea, and it was also their first time seeing the beautiful underwater world. The beautiful scene just now had clearly left an indelible impression in their hearts. Actually, it was not just them. It was also Li Mu's first time seeing such a beautiful scenery. Although he had been to the aquarium in his previous life, how could the feeling through the thick glass compare to being at the bottom of the sea? Li Mu looked at the blushing Wanwan and said gently, "You don't owe them anything anymore. Forget about those unhappiness. There are still many beautiful things in this world that are worth discovering." Wanwan reached out and hugged Li Mu gently. She leaned her head on his chest and said softly, "Thank you, young master." Then she took the initiative to separate from Li Mu. A faint smile appeared on her face, and the haze in the depths of her eyes also disappeared. Looking at Wanwan, who had matured a lot in an instant, Li Mu felt both heartache and happiness. He felt heartache because she had used the betrayal of her family twice in exchange for her ultimate growth. He was happy because she had finally walked out of the trauma of her childhood. After giving Wanwan a deep hug, Li Mu Ruang transformed back into a human form. He put away his dragon horns and retracted his dragon aura. Then he brought the three girls and flew towards an area shrouded in clouds and mist. Xuanzong was located on the East Sea. It was isolated from the rest of the world and did not interact with the outside world often. Only at the Daoist conference held every 5 years would Xuanzong unveil a corner of its hidden veil. No one knew how powerful Xuanzong was, but everyone knew that compared to Fulu, elixirs, array formations and so on, divine arts were the orthodox Taoism. And Xuanzong was famous for its divine arts. Among the 6 Daoist sects, the other 5 sects typically only had 2 to 3 7th realm experts. Xuanzong had a total of 5 7th realm elders. There were even rumors in the outside world that Xuanzong still had 8th realm experts who had yet to perish. When Li Mu and the 3 girls flew to a large group of islands in the East Sea, they were also shocked by the scene before them. On the surface of the sea, dozens of islands formed a powerful formation. In the sky there were countless mountains hanging upside down. Between the mountains there were 5 colored lights connecting them. Cranes were flying back and forth among them. Occasionally there would be streams of light that emitted a powerful aura. The ancestral court of Fulu School looked very shabby compared to the Xuanzong ancestral court. As the future headmaster, Li Mu looked at the Xuanzong mountain gate from afar and blushed slightly. No wonder Xianxia didn't come. If Li Mu was the headmaster he would be too embarrassed to come. Looking at other sects and then looking at his own sect when he returned to Baiyun Mountain he would be too ashamed to see the ancestors who had dedicated their lives to the sect. Li Mu looked at the Xuanzong ancestral court and took a deep breath. One day he would make Fulu School the #1 Daoist sect. At that time he would also hold a conference and invite cultivators from all over the world to turn Baiyun Mountain into a Daoist holy land. But right now the Daoist holy land was still the Xuanzong ancestral court Penglai Mountain. There were 10 continents and 3 islands in this world. Everyone knew the locations of the 10 continents, but the locations of the 3 islands weren't fixed. Legend had it that Fangzhong, Penglai and Kunlun were carried by 3 giant turtles and moved on the sea. As long as one could find these 3 immortal islands, they would be able to see the secrets of immortality. Countless cultivators once went out to sea to search for these 3 immortal islands. Among them there was no lack of 6th realm and 7th realm experts, especially those who were at the end of their lifespans and wanted to find a chance to live. However, no one had ever heard of anyone finding it. Xuanzong named their sect Mount Penglai because they considered themselves an immortal mountain to set off their status. Although it was a little self-flattering in the entire ancestral province, only they had the strength to do so. The area near Xuanzong had a large formation set up that prohibited flying. Li Mu brought the 3 girls to the front of the sect and entered Xuanzong with the cultivators who had just arrived. Not everyone could enter this conference. The entrance fee was 10 pieces of spiritual jade. For someone like Li Mu who was supported by 2 queens, 10 pieces of spiritual jade wasn't much. However, some rogue cultivators would still need to put in some effort to gather 10 pieces of spiritual jade. As the #1 sect of Taoism, Xuanzong's method was a little petty, but there was nothing to criticize. The cultivation of the Xuanzong disciples responsible for collecting spiritual jade at the entrance was not very high. They were only at the 2nd or 3rd realm, but their faces were filled with arrogance. They did not even look 5th realm cultivators in the eye. This was normal. In the #1 sect of Taoism, even if they were only guarding the mountain they were still Xuanzong disciples. In their eyes even Xuanzong's dogs were superior to outsiders. Li Mu handed over 40 pieces of spiritual jade and entered Xuanzong with the 3 girls. Some of the cultivators who came here were alone, but most of them came in groups of 3 to 5. Most of the cultivators who came here wanted to exchange for some treasures. They did not need to worry about their own safety in Xuanzong, but that was no longer the case once they left Xuanzong. After every conference, there would be cases of people getting greedy for treasures and killing people for their belongings. After a long time, the cultivators who came here in search of fortuitous encounters learned to travel in groups. Even though the cultivators who came here came in groups, it was still very rare for a man to have 3 beauties by his side like Li Mu. This attracted the attention of many people. The male cultivators revealed looks of envy as they pointed at Li Mu's back. This person is so lucky. Apart from being a little handsome he looks very ordinary. However, he has 3 beauties by his side. Could he be from some cultivation clan or the disciple of some large sect? The women of the cultivation world are not so superficial as to only look at the face. I think he must have an extraordinary background. Many female cultivators who walked through Xuanzong's entrance were also discussing softly. Look at his bearing. He must be the disciple of a famous sect. I don't think so. He's so handsome and fair. Maybe he's a Xiaobai who was raised by a high-level woman. Definitely not. If he was raised by a high-level woman, why would he have these three beauties by his side? It can't be that these three beauties are raising him, right? You don't understand. It's precisely because there are high-level women raising him that he can raise others. Of course, it's also possible that he has some special skills, which is why he has these three beauties following him. It'd be great if he was a disciple of a large sect. This person looks like a lecher. With my looks, if he takes a fancy to me, I won't have to worry about cultivation resources in the future. Forget it. With your looks, he wouldn't want you even if you gave him for free. You should just give up. Li Mu and Wanwan walked in front and their faces darkened from the gossip behind them. This group of gossipy women actually hit the nail on the head. His Dharma treasures, spirit medicines and spirit jades basically all came from the Empress and Phantom Princess. However, there was nothing he could do about this. Putting aside the fact that he was not the Talisman Puppet Sex Sect Master yet, even if he became the Talisman Puppet Sex Sect Master in the future, and the entire Talisman Puppet Sect would belong to him, he would not be as wealthy as Huan Ji or the Empress. They had the Demon Nation and the Great Zhou Dynasty behind them. How could they compare to the strength of a nation? Li Mu couldn't refute these women's words even if he wanted to. He could only lead the three women a few steps forward and arrive at a large plaza ahead of them. The plaza's floor was paved with countless spirit jades. The entire plaza was divided into crisscrossing streets. The streets were very wide and filled with small stalls. There were tables set up by the stalls, and all kinds of cultivation supplies were placed on the tables. There were pills, fulu, dharma artifacts, books and so on. Behind the tables, there were people loudly hawking their wares. Profound-level divine travel talisman, 10 spirit jades for 1. Middle-level essence nurturing pill, 100 spirit jades for 1 bottle. 500 spirit jades, profound-level flying sword, please take it away. Basic fulu, basic array formation encyclopedia, price can be negotiated. Standing in front of the plaza and looking at the countless inverted immortal mountains, it was like a scene in the divine capital. In Li Mu's heart, the Eastern Sea Xuanzong, the #1 sect of Taoism, didn't seem like much. Chapter 528. What appeared before Li Mu's eyes was shockingly a large-scale trading market. At a glance, there were nearly 100 street stalls set up on the crisscrossing streets. There were people coming and going in front of the stalls, shouting and bargaining. It made the Xian sect ancestral court, which was filled with an immortal aura, look like a marketplace. There was a dazzling array of things on display in the market, from fulu pills to magic treasures and cultivation methods. There were all kinds of strange things. On both sides of the street there were rows of shops. In terms of decoration they were much better than the street stalls. There was also a long line of customers outside. Li Mu glanced around and understood that these people who set up stalls outside were itinerant cultivators from small sections. And those who could open shops on the street were not from the 6 major sects, but from famous Daoist cultivation families. Li Mu casually looked at a few stalls, walked into 2 shops and found some patterns. All the things in the shops were very expensive, but the quality was definitely top-notch. On the other hand, the things in the stalls on the streets were of mixed quality, but they were cheap. If one's eyesight was good enough, they might be able to find something good. In terms of service, the itinerant cultivators in the stalls were full of enthusiasm. They had smiles on their faces from beginning to end, making people feel like they were bathing in a spring breeze. The disciples of the sects and families in the shops were all expressionless and ignored people. Even so, there was still an endless stream of customers in these shops. This was also very normal. When cultivators bought cultivation items, the first thing they looked at was the quality. If the fulu didn't work, the flying sword would break when it collided with people, and the elixir would explode and die. No matter how cheap it was, no one would buy it. The 6 major sects each studied their own path, and each of them was an old shop with nearly 1,000 years of history. Buying things from the 6 major sects might be expensive, but they would never buy the wrong thing. This was related to their lives, and almost no one would care about that little bit of spiritual jade. Only some cultivators who were really embarrassed with money would patronize the roadside stalls. Shopping was a woman's nature. Even female dragons and female foxes were no exception. Xiao Bai, Wanwan and Xianxia had just arrived, and their eyes were already busy. Although they followed closely behind Li Mu, their eyes kept looking around. Li Mu came out this time to make Wanwan happy. After casually visiting 2 shops, he said to them, "You 3 can shop by yourselves. Tell me if you see anything you like. You can buy anything you want today." Wanwan and Xiao Bai, of course, Li Mu doted on them as much as he could. Xianxia had performed well along the way. Wanwan was able to walk out of her depressed state because of Xianxia, so Li Mu counted her in. It was said that every dragon had countless treasures, and their wealth was comparable to that of a country. When she escaped from her home, she only had 2 pitchforks on her, which was really a disgrace to the dragon race. Li Mu was rarely generous and let her buy some goods. "Thank you, young master." "Thank you, benefactor." Hearing this, Xiao Bai, Wanwan's face showed excitement. She quickly stood on tiptoe and kissed Li Mu on both sides of his face. This scene made many of the surrounding male cultivators extremely envious. "Thank you, my lord." Xianxia imitated them and puckered her lips. Li Mu pressed her head and said, "Forget about you. You smell like seafood." After receiving Li Mu's promise, the 3 girls completely let go of their natural instincts. They lingered in front of various stalls and shops. Other cultivators were either looking at magic treasures or fulu pills, but they never lacked these. Their eyes were full of immortal clothes and accessories. Everyone loved beauty, especially women. But in the cultivation world, cultivators' pursuit of strength was always the first. They would not spend precious spiritual jades to buy things that were not suitable for them. In front of a small stall, the 3 girls stopped at the same time. The accessories and clothes here, whether it was the material or the style, could not be compared to the shops in the secular world. Although they were not useful, they were good-looking. Especially when compared to the simple stalls and shops in the surroundings, it was a beautiful scenery. A few female cultivators were also attracted by the goods on the stall. After asking about the price, they shook their heads and walked away. Although these clothes were called immortal clothes, other than the beautiful style, they had no other use. The defense was pitifully weak. Who would spend 100 spiritual jades to buy these flashy but useless things? The owner of the stall was a young man. He was short and ugly. At this moment he was sitting on a stone bench with a frown. He had already set up a stall for half a day, but he could not sell a single piece of clothing or jewelry. He knew very well why the goods could not be sold. Although these things were beautiful, they were not practical for cultivators. Female cultivators among the loose cultivators liked them but could not afford them. Female cultivators in aristocratic families and sects did not lack spiritual jades. They would not condescend to buy clothes at a roadside stall. If they wanted to go, they would go to the shops of the big sections. Although the things there were not beautiful, they were practical. He could not compare. Unfortunately, when he went to those sects to ask for cooperation and wanted to put the immortal clothes in their shops to sell, even if he gave them 40% of the profits, he was mercilessly rejected. Seeing 3 more beautiful female cultivators in front of the stall, the depressed expression on the young man's face disappeared in a second. He put on a bright smile and said enthusiastically, "Dear customers, what would you like to see?" Seeing Wanwan's gaze looking at one of the immortal clothes, he immediately said, "This colorful cloud brocade dress is very suitable for you. This dress is woven from the silk of a transformed silkworm demon. You can touch it with your hand. This dress is smooth to the touch and feels light when worn. It is very comfortable. In addition, this immortal clothes also have the effect of avoiding dust. It is also a defensive magic artifact." Xiao Bai's gaze swept past a piece of clothing and he immediately said, "Miss, this purple silk dress with jade green patterns doesn't suit you. Look at this silver-patterned 100 butterflies flower dress at the side. I feel that this immortal robe suits your temperament better." Xianxia's gaze only lingered on the pendant for a moment. The young man continued, "Miss, you have good eyesight. This 5-colored stone pendant is naturally formed. There is no trace of carving. It is the best of the best. As long as you pay 200 spirit jades, you can have it." This young man was obviously very good at promoting. With just a few words, Wanwan and the others were tempted to buy. Li Mu saw that and did not stop them. Although these bright and beautiful clothes did not have any practical use, Wan and the others' defensive magic artifacts were more advanced clothes-fitting inner armor. They bought these clothes for beauty. In the end, the three women each chose a piece of clothing and a piece of jewelry. Li Mu was about to pay when the vendor continued, "Miss, don't you want to look at something else? You just chose autumn clothes. There are spring, summer and winter clothes here. Look at this lotus leaf feather gauze dress. It is very suitable for summer. And this cloud butterfly dress is the best choice for spring clothes. If you miss this opportunity, you will have to wait 5 years." Wan and Xiaobai thought about it and felt that what he said made sense. Thus, they each bought a few more pieces of clothing. The young man knew that he had met a big customer this time. The smile on his face became even brighter. He continued, "Miss, do you want to buy a few pieces for your friends? If there are more than 20 pieces, I can give you a 10% discount for each piece. If you buy 10,000 spiritual jades this time, I will give you a 20% discount next time." Wan turned to look at Li Mu and said, "Young master, why don't you buy a few pieces for Miss and Big Sister Qing?" Xiaobai also said, "Also Big Sister Zhou, Big Sister Ali and Auntie Mei. If they know that we came out to play and did not bring them gifts, they might not be happy." Yao Qingxin also looked at Li Mu expectantly. "Can I buy 10 more pieces for myself?" Although Li Mu did not lack spiritual jades, his spiritual jades did not grow on trees. They were given to him by the Empress and Huanji. It would be a waste to buy these useless things. His heart ached for the spiritual jades. However, he had already said what he wanted. If he went back on his words now, it would affect his great image in the hearts of Wan and Xiaobai. More importantly, if Lu Hanyan and the Empress knew that Li Mu had brought Xiaobai and the others out to play and did not bring them gifts, it would not just be a matter of them being unhappy. Li Mu could pretend that he did not care. He waved his hand and said, "Buy. Buy as much as you want." The three girls were very happy to choose. The peddler's eyes were shining. He held a pen in his hand and quickly calculated on a piece of paper. When Li Mu saw the final number, even if he was mentally prepared, he did not expect that they would actually choose something worth 20,000 spiritual jades. Wan also saw the final number. As if she had done something wrong, she tugged on Li Mu's sleeve and whispered, "Young master, why don't we not buy so many?" Before Li Mu could say anything, a voice came from behind him. "You are not even willing to buy such little things for the beauties. You are too stingy. Today I, Qing Xuanzi, will buy everything that these three beauties want. Just treat it as making friends." A handsome young man walked out from behind. The man was hugging two girls on his left and right, and there were another two following behind him. These 4 girls could not be considered as exceptional beauties, but their appearances were still outstanding. However, when compared to Wan, Xiaobai and Xianxia, they were somewhat dull. The sudden appearance of the young man and his identity caused a commotion in the surrounding crowd. "Qing Xuanzi. I heard that he is not even 30 years old, but his cultivation is already at the 5th realm. Among the young disciples of Xuanzong, his strength can be ranked in the top 10. Rumor has it that he cultivates the yin and yang dual cultivation technique. He has more than a dozen cultivation partners around him. I'm afraid he has taken a fancy to these 3 girls. Sai, why didn't Master Qing Xuanzi take a fancy to me? I am also willing to be his cultivation partner." The young man beside the 3 girls also has an extraordinary aura. He doesn't look like an ordinary person. So what? Even if he has a small background, can he compare to the core disciples of Xuanzong? One who was unaccountably solicitous was hiding evil intentions. This guy who called himself Qing Xuanzi belittled Li Mu and raised himself up as soon as they met. His gaze did not leave Xiaobai and the other 2 girls for even a moment. Li Mu looked at him indifferently, quietly waiting for his performance. Qing Xuanzi smiled at Xiaobai and Wan and said, "I'm Qing Xuanzi, a 4th-generation disciple of Xuanzong. I don't have any other intentions. I just want to get to know the 3 of you." Without waiting for Xiaobai and the others to speak, he looked at the young stall owner and asked, "How many spiritual jades do the 3 beauties want? I'll pay for them." No matter who paid, the spiritual jades would be in his hands. The young man was overjoyed and immediately said, "The total is 20,800 spiritual jades. I'll round it down, so 20,000 will do." Qing Xuanzi was startled and asked uncertainly, "How much?" The young man smiled and said, 20,000 low-grade spiritual jades. Qing Xuanzi's eyes widened a little. "It's just a few pieces of clothing and it costs 20,000 spiritual jades?" Is this stall owner crazy? His face darkened and he said angrily, "Bastard, how dare you scam Xuanzong? What do you have here that's worth 20,000 spiritual jades?" Although he had 20,000 spiritual jades, he was not so generous as to give it to a stranger he had just met. The young man pointed innocently at the nearly 100 pieces of clothing and all the accessories on the stall and said, "These three ladies have bought almost everything here." Qing Xuanzi's face turned red and white. He turned to look at Xiao Bai and Wan Wan with a smile and said, "Ladies, why are you buying so many clothes?" As soon as he finished speaking, Li Mu reached out his hand and a pile of spiritual jades appeared in the void. He looked at the young stall owner and said, "There are 200 mid-grade spiritual jades here. Keep them well." Spiritual jades were divided into different grades. A mid-grade spiritual jade was worth 100 low-grade spiritual jades. As the currency in the cultivation world, people were used to pricing things in terms of the lowest grade spiritual jades. Li Mu flipped his hand again and all the clothes and accessories on the stall disappeared. Flask Sky Treasure. Someone in the crowd cried out in surprise. Which cultivator didn't want to possess a Flask Sky Treasure? It could be used to store items conveniently. However, only 7th level cultivators could master the Flask Sky art. Even 7th level cultivators would have to spend a lot of effort to create a Flask Sky Dharma treasure that could be used for storage. This young man must have an extremely prominent background to be able to casually throw out 20,000 spiritual jades to buy some useless clothes and accessories with the Flask Sky treasure. At least Qing Xuanzi could not be so generous. Under the strong contrast, the people who felt that Qing Xuanzi was quite charismatic just a moment ago now felt like a clown. On the other hand, the young man who spent a lot of money was filled with an indescribable elegance in his every move. The young stall owner wrapped the 200 mid-grade spiritual jades with a piece of black cloth in an instant. He looked at Li Mu with shining eyes and said, "Sir, I'll give you a 30% discount the next time you buy something from me." Qing Xuanzi's face turned from white to black. Li Mu was held by Wan Wan on the left and Xiao Bai on the right. When he walked past Qing Xuanzi, he whispered in a voice that everyone could hear, "Why are you pretending if you don't have money?" The crowd burst into laughter. Qing Xuanzi clenched his fists so hard that the veins on the back of his hands bulged, but he quickly relaxed them. The stall owner had already disappeared into the crowd after selling all the goods and obtaining the spiritual jades. A Xuanzong disciple walked over from afar and looked at Qing Xuanzi in confusion. He asked, "Senior brother Qing Xuanzi, what's wrong?" Qing Xuanzi looked at the disappearing figures and gritted his teeth. Investigate this person's background. Chapter 529. The Xuanzong disciple followed Qing Xuanzi's gaze and asked, "Did that person offend you, senior brother?" Qing Xuanzi said coldly, "This person dared to insult me. I can't take this lying down." The Xuanzong disciple looked at Qing Xuanzi and shook his head. "Since this person insulted you, senior brother, just return the favor. Why do you need to investigate his background? No matter how powerful he is, can he be more powerful than you, senior brother?" Before Qing Xuanzi could speak, Qing Songzi said indifferently, "Who are you, senior brother?" "You're the leader of the 4th generation disciples of Xuanzong. No matter what his background is, whether he's a disciple of the 5 sects, a disciple of an aristocratic family or a royal family of a country, can he be more powerful than you, senior brother?" Qing Xuanzi looked at his junior brother with a glint in his eyes. Qing Songzi was right. He was one of the 10 core disciples of Xuanzong. As the head of the 6 Taoist sects, Xuanzong was above the secular imperial power. The core disciples of the other 5 sects couldn't be compared to him in terms of status. As for those aristocratic families and the secular imperial family, they couldn't be compared to Xuanzong. What did he have to be afraid of? As if he thought of something, he looked at Qing Songzi and said indifferently, "Junior brother, you seem to want me to have a conflict with this person." Qing Songzi shrugged and said helplessly, "What are you thinking, senior brother? I just think that you're too cautious and you're embarrassing Xuanzong. If you're worried that this person has a powerful background and you don't dare to provoke him, I'll help you find someone to investigate him. But it might take some time, so please be patient, senior brother." Qing Xuanzi waved his hand and said coldly, "No need to investigate. Why would I be afraid of a nobody?" Seeing Qing Xuanzi leave, Qing Songzi raised his hands and sneered in his heart. "Idiot who only thinks with his lower body. He's just relying on a good master. What right does he have to be one of the 10 core disciples? Let's see if you can afford to offend someone who can ride a dragon. As Li Mu led Wanwan and the others to continue strolling around the market, the number of gazes on him increased. Some discussions and speculations about his identity also began to increase. Some people said that he was a disciple of a cultivation clan, some said that he was a prince of some royal family, and some said that he was a core disciple of one of the 5 sections. Although his seniority in the Fulu school was high, he did not show his face often. As for the other sects, other than a few elders and heads, basically no one had seen him before. Li Mu wandered around for a while with the intention of finding a few treasures. Soon he was disappointed to find that although there were many strange things here, most of them were useless. However, he saw some materials that could be used to write heavenly secret talismans. Li Mu walked in front of a small stall selling elixirs, casually picked a few stalks and asked, "How much are these?" The stall owner calculated and said, 500 spiritual jades. You can take all of them. Li Mu picked up a white stick that was about half an arm's length. It looked like jade and stone, but it was not stone. He placed it in the pile of elixirs and said, "Many of these elixirs are not old enough. 500 spiritual jades is too expensive. I'm too lazy to bargain with you. Including this, I'll give you 500 spiritual jades." In fact, the stall owner did not know what the white object was. It was something he accidentally dug out from the ground 2 years ago. It was abnormally hard and did not have much spiritual qi. It had been left here for a long time and no one wanted it. After thinking about it, he waved his hand and said, "I'll give it to you." He saw clearly that this person had just thrown out 20,000 spiritual jades, so his price was indeed a little high. These elixirs were worth at most 400 spiritual jades. Seeing that the other party did not bargain, he did not lose anything by giving him something worthless. Li Mu picked up the white object and put it away first. It was actually a spiritual bone. On the surface, it did not have much spiritual qi, but after it was ground into powder, it was a material for writing high-level Fulu. Judging from the appearance, the owner of this bone was at least at the 6th Zhou Xian, if not the 7th realm transcendence. Li Mu was about to put away these elixirs when a voice suddenly came from the side. "I'll take these elixirs for 600 spiritual jades." Li Mu turned to look at Xianxia, who was expressionless. The stall owner naturally wanted to sell more spiritual jades, but he had already promised someone. If it were someone else, he might still reluctantly sell to the young man who made the first bid. However, this was Xianxia, Xuanzong's core disciple. He could not afford to offend him in Xuanzong's territory. He was in a dilemma. Li Mu saw the stall owner's dilemma and said with a smile, "In that case, let him have this elixir." The stall owner breathed a sigh of relief and quickly said, "Thank you, young master. I'll give it to you as an apology." Li Mu did not even look at Xianxia and continued to pick up treasures. One moment he had his eyes on a flying sword, the next moment he had his eyes on a bottle of medicinal pills, and the next moment he had his eyes on a cultivation technique. However, every time he wanted to buy it, Xianxia would step in and buy it at a price that was 100 spirit jades higher than his. Li Mu would always give in. Wanwan gritted her teeth and said, "This person is too hateful. He always steals what we want." Li Mu smiled and said, "It's okay. The highest bidder gets it. This is the rule. As long as he has enough spiritual jades, he can buy everything here." Many people in the market had already seen that Xianxia and the unidentified young man were fighting. Every time the young man would snatch the items that the young man wanted. At first they thought that the two of them would have a conflict because of this. However, the young man seemed to be very magnanimous. After being robbed by Xianxia several times, he was not angry at all. After watching for a while, everyone saw the clues. It was not that the young man was magnanimous. He was clearly toying with Xianxia. He deliberately pretended to be interested in those items. His goal was to waste Xianxia's spiritual jades. Xianxia was a core disciple of Xuanzong. Although his cultivation was high, he obviously did not know the ways of the world. He thought that he had benefited, but in fact he had been played like a monkey. Xianxia followed behind Li Mu and gradually realized that something was wrong. Seeing the expressions of the people around him and the whispers in the distance, his face became even gloomier. When he saw Li Mu pick up another flying sword and was about to pay the stall owner with spiritual jades, he did not make a move, which was rare. Seeing that Xianxia did not make a move, Li Mu put away the spiritual jades that he had already taken out and said to the stall owner apologetically, "I'm sorry, I suddenly don't want them." When Xianxia saw this, How could he not know that he had been toyed with? His face was livid and he wanted to draw his sword and fight this person. However, he also knew that he was not in the right now. Once he made a move, even if he won, he would be talked about. He took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed his anger. Seeing that Xianxia did not fall for it, Li Mu walked to a small stall. The stall owner was a middle-aged man with a cultivation at the third realm. His hair was messy and his beard was unshaven. He looked rather sloppy. Li Mu pointed at an item on the stone table in front of him and asked, "How much is this?" The stall owner was fiddling with a pile of items on the stone table. He looked up at Li Mu, then lowered his head again and said softly, 1,000 spiritual jades. As soon as he said that, there was a burst of laughter from the surroundings. He wants to sell this lousy item for 1,000 spiritual jades? He must be crazy for spiritual jades. I've already seen him selling here for 10 years. In the 2 exchanges he didn't sell a single item. He's really determined to come again this year. Of all the things he can do with 1,000 spiritual jades, which idiot would spend 1,000 spiritual jades on a pile of junk? The middle-aged stall owner turned a deaf ear to everyone's mockery and continued fiddling with the items in his hands. Li Mu picked up the item that he had his eyes on and continued to ask, "How do I use this?" The middle-aged man looked up at him again and said, "Fill it with spiritual jades from the back and activate it with dermic powers. Then you can attack from the front." Li Mu looked at the item in his hands. Although it was small, it was heavy. The back was square and the front was a hollow iron cylinder. Li Mu put it down and said, "I'll take it for 1,000 spiritual jades." The middle-aged man's hands paused. He did not expect that someone would really spend 1,000 spiritual jades to buy his item. Not far behind Li Mu, Xianxia had a vigilant look on his face. He subconsciously thought that this person was setting him up again, wanting him to spend a large amount of spiritual jades to buy such a useless item. However, if this was really a treasure, wouldn't this person be taking advantage of it for nothing? After careful consideration, he walked up and said calmly, "I'll give you 1,001 spiritual jades." He only had 1 spiritual jade more than this person. 1 spiritual jade could not do anything, but it could cause greater humiliation to this person. Li Mu did not give it to Xianxia this time. He said calmly, 2,000 spiritual jades. Xianxia said, 2,001 spiritual jades. Li Mu hesitated for a moment and said again, 3,000 spiritual jades. Xianxia did not hesitate. 3,001 spiritual jades. Li Mu looked furious. He looked at Xianxia and said angrily, "What are you trying to do?" The angrier Li Mu was, the happier Xianxia felt. He glanced at Li Mu and said calmly, "It just so happens that I have my eyes on this item as well. The highest bidder gets it. Even if it's 1 spiritual jade higher, it's still high." A useless piece of trash was actually bid 3,000 spiritual jades by 2 people. The onlookers were dumbfounded. Was this the world of rich people? Li Mu looked extremely pained. He squeezed out a few words from between his teeth, "For 1,000 spiritual jades." Xianxia also hesitated for a moment this time, but when he saw Li Mu's expression he said decisively, 4,001 spiritual jades. The pained and conflicted expression on Li Mu's face melted like spring rain after Xianxia shouted that number. He smiled at Xianxia and said, "Congratulations, the treasure is yours." Chapter 530. In the market, when Xianxia bought the treasure with 4,000 spiritual jades, the crowd was stunned for a moment, and then there was a lot of laughter. It was not common to see a core disciple of Xuanzong being played like this so many times. Xianxia stood there in a daze and his face turned from green to black. He was played again. This damn guy made him spend 4,000 spiritual jades to buy a piece of trash. Hearing the laughter around him, Xianxia's face sank. He took out 40 mid-grade spiritual jades and 1 low-grade spiritual jade and placed them on the stone table in front of the stall owner. Although he was distressed and angry, he had to pay the spiritual jades. Otherwise he would lose Xuanzong's face. At this moment his hatred for the person in front of him was monstrous. He took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in his heart. He looked at the stall owner and asked, "How do I use this?" The stall owner put away the spiritual jades and pointed at a groove behind the item. He said, "Inlay a spiritual jade here and activate it with spiritual power. It will launch an attack from here." Xianxia did as he was told and inlaid a low-grade spiritual jade into the groove behind the item. He aimed the metal cylinder at the front at the empty space in the distance and activated it with spiritual power. The spiritual jade disappeared instantly, but there was no attack from the metal cylinder. Instead, the item in his hand exploded. Although Xianxia put up a shield in time and was not injured, he still looked very embarrassed. The middle-aged stall owner looked at the mess on the ground and shook his head. Failed again. At this moment, Xianxia's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. He spent 4,000 spiritual jades to buy the item, and with just one explosion, not only did he lose the spiritual jades, but he also lost face in front of so many people. Most importantly, in order to maintain his composure, he could only suppress all his anger and stay here. Because if he left, he did not know what the people here would say about him behind his back. He pretended as if nothing happened and continued to walk around the nearby stalls, but he was a little further away from Li Mu. After many exchanges, he did not gain the upper hand, so he chose to temporarily retreat. Li Mu was still standing in front of the middle-aged man's stall. The middle-aged man looked at him and said, "What else do you want? I'll make it clear first, once the items here are sold, they are not refundable. Think carefully before you buy." Li Mu looked at the pile of things on the table and said, "I don't want these things." The middle-aged man looked up and asked, "Then what are you still doing here?" Li Mu looked at him and said, "I want you." The middle-aged man was stunned for a moment. He shrank back and asked, "What do you mean?" Li Mu picked up an item that was very similar to the one Xianxia had just bought and asked the middle-aged man, "This item wasn't originally this big, right?" The middle-aged man's dispirited eyes suddenly lit up. "You know these things too?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "I don't understand. I'm just slightly interested, but I'm looking forward to seeing what they look like after they grow up. I'm even more looking forward to seeing more types of them. They can run on the ground, fly in the sky, swim in the water." The middle-aged man shook his head and said, "That would require a lot of spiritual jades, a lot of manpower, and a lot of materials." Li Mu smiled and said, "I lack everything, but I don't lack people, spirit jades, or materials." The middle-aged man breathed quickly and said, "If you can provide me with these things, I'll give you my life." Li Mu shook his head and said, "I don't want your life. If you need these things, come to the Department of Worship in the divine capital of Great Zhou and find me. My name is Li Mu." The middle-aged man was silent for a moment. He looked up and said, "You can call me Mo Li." Li Mu raised his eyebrows. "The successor of the Daoist?" The middle-aged man lowered his head and said with a complicated tone, "I didn't expect that there would still be people who remember the Daoist." Not long after, Li Mu walked in the market. Wan held Li Mu's arm and asked in confusion, "Young master, what did you mean by what you said to that person?" Li Mu smiled and didn't explain too much. He only said, "He is a very capable person. I invited him to work for the imperial court." After walking around the various streets and seeing that they were not as curious as before, Li Mu planned to take them to the Fulu school's shop here. He had just taken 2 steps when his right wrist was suddenly gripped tightly. He looked to his right and found that Xianxia was holding his hand tightly. Her eyes were fixed on a stall. That stall sold all kinds of cultivation books. There were Fulu basics, alchemy basics, and array basics. Xianxia's gaze was fixed on one of the books. It was a thin book, but there were only a few crooked glyphs on the book. Li Mu didn't recognize a single word. He knew the Great Zhou language, the Shin language, and the Yao language, but he had never seen the one in front of him. Xianxia didn't say anything, but she had already conveyed her intentions to Li Mu. Li Mu walked toward the stall, but a figure beat him to it. Xianxia walked to the stall and picked up the thin book. He asked the stall owner, "How much is this book?" The stall owner bought this strange book from the secular world with a few taels of silver. He didn't recognize the words on it. Seeing that the other party was a disciple of Xuanzong, he wanted to curry favor with him. He smiled and said, "If you want it, 100 spiritual jades will do." Xianxia didn't recognize the words either. He just felt that the book was strange and wanted to buy it to ask his master. He had just taken out the spiritual jades when a voice came from behind him. "I'll pay 1,000 spiritual jades." Xianxia looked back and saw Li Mu. Anger appeared on his face. He gritted his teeth and said, "I'll pay 2,000. Li Mu's expression didn't change. 3,000. Xianxia gritted his teeth. 4,000. Li Mu continued to raise the price. 5,000. Qing Xuanzi threw the book into Li Mu's arms and sneered. This is yours. Earlier, this person asked him to pay 4,000 spiritual jades for a piece of trash. Now he asked this person to pay 5,000 spiritual jades for something that was worth 100 spiritual jades. He was very happy and even half of his anger disappeared. However, when he saw Li Mu pay the spiritual jades directly, he felt that something was wrong. He wasn't as excited as before. The stall owner didn't care about that. He liked these two guests too much. He got 5,000 spiritual jades for free. This trip to Xuanzong was complete. He was worried that the other party would go back on his word, so he immediately packed up and left as fast as he could. The people around shook their heads. Although this mysterious young man was smart, he still fell for Qing Xuanzi's trick this time and lost 5,000 spiritual jades for nothing. They had never seen 5,000 spiritual jades in their lives. Li Mu walked to Qing Exin and asked her with uncertainty, "Are you sure this book is worth 5,000 spiritual jades? Can you understand it?" Qing Exin whispered, "Of course, this is the secret text of the dragon race." Li Mu was stunned for a moment, then asked, "What's written on it?" Qing Exin didn't translate for him. Instead, she bit the tip of her finger and dripped a drop of blood on it. After her blood dripped on the page, it disappeared. At the same time, the thin book in Li Mu's hand suddenly emitted a strange aura. Li Mu was too familiar with this aura. This was the aura of the heavenly book. Almost instantly, he put the book into the pot. However, the moment the aura spread out, many people around still felt it. "What's that?" "That aura is too mysterious. Treasure, it's actually a treasure." The cultivators in the market were shocked. They thought that the young man was tricked by Qing Xuanzi. No one would have thought that it was actually a treasure. The aura just now was so mysterious. This book must be a great treasure, and its value far exceeded 5,000 spiritual jades. Qing Xuanzi was completely dumbfounded. He was completely stunned on the spot. At this moment, he could no longer suppress the anger in his heart and vented it all out. With a thought, a flying sword floated above his head. The flying sword shone brightly and attacked Li Mu. Qing Xuanzi followed closely behind and roared, "Thief, give me back my treasure." Facing Qing Xuanzi's aggressive flying sword, Li Mu didn't do anything, but Qing Exin beside him couldn't stand still. She took a step forward and a giant dragon shadow rushed out of her body. The shadow let out a dragon's roar and collided with the flying sword. The flying sword was sent flying back and the sword light immediately dimmed. Qing Xuanzi spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes were wide open as he looked at Qing Exin and said in horror, "Dragon race." The market was instantly in an uproar. Dragon race? That girl is actually a dragon. Oh my god, I actually saw a true dragon in my lifetime. I know, she's the giant dragon we saw at sea. That dragon is exactly the same as this shadow. Then this young master is the powerhouse riding the dragon. Who is he? He's so rich that he even has a dragon mount. After Qing Xuanzi and Qing Exin released their auras without restraint, a few figures suddenly flew out from the Immortal Mountain hanging upside down in the sky. Their voices were heard before they arrived. "Who is so bold to be so presumptuous in my Xuanzong?" An old man flew down from above. Someone in the market blurted out, "It's Elder Hua Yangzi. His cultivation is only one step away from Zhou Xian, far surpassing Qing Xuanzi. This person is in trouble." Amidst the discussion, the old man floated over. However, when he flew to the market and saw Li Mu, his originally tense face immediately became respectful. He cupped his fists and said, "Hua Yangzi greets Uncle Master Li." Seeing Elder Hua Yangzi of Xuanzong respectfully saluting this young man, the crowd was stunned. Uncle Master? This mysterious powerhouse with a true dragon mount was Elder Hua Yangzi's Uncle Master. Wasn't that the same seniority as the sect master of Xuanzong? Qing Xuanzi was even more shocked and frightened. Hua Yangzi was his Uncle Master. Didn't that mean he had to call Hua Yangzi his Uncle Master? Li Mu didn't know many of the elders of Xuanzong. Other than Immortal Miao Dun, there were only the 5 people who had been to Emperor Bai's cave residence. The old man in front of him was one of the 5. Li Mu glanced at him with one hand behind his back. He looked at Qing Xuanzi and said lightly, "Xuanzong has taught a good disciple." Chapter 531. Hua Yangzi knew very well that although Li Mu was young, he was a second-generation disciple of Fulu school and was above them in terms of seniority. However, Qing Xuanzi was also a core disciple that Xuanzong focused on. He hesitated for a moment and said to Qing Xuanzi, if you have offended Martial Uncle Li in any way, apologize to him quickly. I believe that Martial Uncle Li is a magnanimous person and won't make a fuss about it. Li Mu glanced at Qing Xuanzi. This old man was smooth and cunning in dealing with things. He covered up everything with one sentence. If he didn't let this matter go, it would seem that he was narrow-minded. However, Qing Xuanzi obviously didn't give Huayangzi any face. He didn't even look at him. He quietly put away his flying sword and flew straight to the celestial mountain above. Huayangzi looked embarrassed and said to Li Mu, I'm sorry, Martial Uncle Li. These young disciples offended you. I apologize to you. Li Mu waved his hand and said, this has nothing to do with you. You don't have to apologize. Judging from Qing Xuanzi's attitude towards Huayangzi, Xuanzong and Fulu school undoubtedly had a completely different sect culture. Fulu school attached great importance to seniority. Therefore, even if Xianxia and Yuzenzi's cultivation had reached the transcendent realm, they still had to respectfully call Fu Daozi martial uncle when they saw him. Similarly, no matter how talented and strong the fourth-generation disciples were, they wouldn't be too presumptuous in front of the seniors of the sect whose cultivation was lower than theirs. Xuanzong obviously valued strength more. Although Qing Xuanzi's cultivation wasn't as good as Huayangzi's, he was also in the fifth realm. Moreover, he was extremely young and had unlimited potential in the future. When facing the seniors of the sect, he also had arrogance in his bones. It couldn't be said which sect culture was better. Fulu school respected the teachers more. However, Xuanzong respected strength and the disciples had a stronger motivation to cultivate. Perhaps this was one of the reasons why Xuanzong had so many powerhouses. After apologizing to Li Mu, Huayangzi quickly left. In the marketplace, many gazes were focused on Li Mu, and the sounds of discussion were endless. Even elder Huayangzi calls him martial uncle. He must be one of the second-generation disciples of the 5 sections. No wonder he's so wealthy and has a dragon as his mount. Qing Xuanzi really can't compare to such a status. At first I thought that Qing Xuanzi was a refined disciple of a large sect. Now it seems that this person is narrow-minded and irritable. What kind of treasure did that senior obtain just now? The discussions reached Li Mu's ears. Obviously he couldn't stay there any longer. Li Mu prepared to go to the Fulu school's shop, but before he went he stopped in front of a small stall. This stall was where Qing Xuanzi had snatched the spirit herbs and Li Mu had obtained the spirit bone. He reached out and threw a jade bottle to the stall owner saying, refine it well. It's enough for you to break through to the transcendent realm. The stall owner was stunned for a moment. He opened the bottle and immediately smelled a refreshing pill fragrance. With just a whiff, his stagnant cultivation seemed to have loosened. He immediately put away the jade bottle and excitedly bowed to Li Mu. Thank you, senior. Li Mu waved his hand and left with Wan Xiaobai and the other 2. The stall owner held the jade bottle tightly in his hand, his eyes full of gratitude. It was easy to find the Fulu school's shop here. The shops of the other small sects and clans only had 1 floor at most, but the 5 sects each occupied a large 3-story building. As for the Xuanzong school, their shop was at the center of the place. It was the most prosperous location and it was 5 stories high. In front of the Fulu pavilion, cultivators lined up in an orderly manner. Fulu school's products had always been in short supply in the cultivation world. Li Mu walked in with the 3 girls. A cultivator frowned and said, why are they cutting the line? A Fulu school disciple looked up and immediately came forward, saying respectfully, greetings, Uncle Master. Inside the shop, several Fulu school disciples also quickly came forward and greeted respectfully. Greetings, Uncle Master. Greetings, Uncle Master. Seeing this, the people lining up outside the shop immediately stopped talking. However, they couldn't help but be curious. This young man actually had such a high seniority in the Fulu school. Li Mu waved his hand to the disciples and said, go about your business. I'm just here to take a look. An elder led Li Mu and the others to the 3rd floor. After offering them some fragrant tea, he respectfully retreated. Li Mu let Wan and Xiaobai rest here. He grabbed Xianxia's hand and with a thought, the 2 of them appeared in the Demon Emperor's cave. A thin book with strange runes written on it floated in front of him. There was a page in the book. It was different from the other pages. It exuded a strange aura. It was of the same origin as all the pages of the heavenly tomes that Li Mu had seen before. He reached out his hand and the page automatically flew out and floated in his palm. Xianxia picked up the book and flipped through it. She said in shock, "This really is the Dragon King's relic." The Dragon Clan's language was widely acknowledged to be difficult to learn. They often used a single character to contain a huge amount of information. Sometimes they used many characters to express a simple meaning. Li Mu didn't understand the Dragon Clan's language. He asked Xianxia, "Who is the Dragon King?" Xianxia said, 8,000 years ago he was a supreme master of the Dragon Clan. He once united the Dragon Clan of the Four Seas. He was the recognized king of the Dragon Clan. 8,000 years ago, a master of the Dragon Clan. Without a doubt, the Dragon King that Xianxia mentioned was one of the supreme masters that stood at the peak of the continent. Li Mu became curious about the relic he left behind. He asked Xianxia, "What's written on it?" Xianxia looked at the content on the page and her face gradually turned red. Li Mu was speechless. "Why are you blushing? Hurry up and read it." "What does this line mean?" Xianxia lowered her head and whispered, "The taste of the Snake Clan's women is not bad. Their long legs are too clingy." She also said that she would call her sister over tomorrow. "I'm looking forward to tomorrow." Li Mu cursed in his mind. This can't be that dragon's diary, right? He didn't hear the secret information he wanted to hear. Li Mu continued to point to the next page. "What does this line mean?" Xianxia's face turned even redder. "The Fox clan is really amazing in bed. It's a pity that her brother is a nine-tailed celestial fox. It's not worth it to fight with him. I won't look for her in the future. The book said that dragons were lustful by nature. Sure enough, this old perverted dragon actually wrote a book about love. But whether he should say it or not, the Snake Clan's legs were really clingy, and the Fox Clan was really amazing in bed." Li Mu coughed lightly and pulled his thoughts back to reality. "What's next?" Xianxia continued to read with a red face. "I tricked a Xian ghost these past few days. She said that her physical body had already developed intelligence. I don't know if the two of them together—" Stop. You don't have to read anymore." No matter how thick-skinned Li Mu was, he couldn't force a pure little female dragon to read such indecent things to him. That was too sinful. He looked at Xianxia and directly asked, "Apart from these things, is there anything else that's useful?" Xianxia continued to flip through the pages. Only when she flipped to the last page did she say, "Lord Dragon King said that he discovered a great secret hidden in the Dragon Clan's heavenly book." Li Mu continued to ask, "And then?" Xianxia shook her head. "And then there's nothing else." This broken chapter dragon made Li Mu's heart itch. However, he didn't say anything. Li Mu could see for himself. The page in his hand should be the Dragon Clan's heavenly book. However, for some reason the Dragon King didn't pass it down. Instead, he hid it in this dating diary. Li Mu scanned this heavenly book with his spiritual sense. However, this time he didn't enter that strange world like he usually did. A strong rebound force came from the page. Li Mu grunted and took a few steps back. He swallowed a mouthful of blood that came back up. He was slightly injured just by trying to comprehend this page. This page of the heavenly book was obviously sealed by someone. As one of the most ancient races, the Dragon Clan had many strange and unpredictable supernatural powers. Li Mu thought for a while and handed the page to Xianxia. "Try to touch this page with your spiritual sense." Xianxia closed her eyes and opened them quickly. She shook her head and said, "My spiritual sense can't enter." It was the same heavenly book. Li Mu was hit by a rebound force when he tried to comprehend it. Although Xianxia didn't comprehend anything, she wasn't injured either. Perhaps it had something to do with her identity as a dragon. However, why couldn't she comprehend this page even with her identity as a dragon? Why did the Dragon Clan from 8,000 years ago cut off the Dragon Clan's inheritance? Li Mu couldn't speculate about this point. He could only put away this heavenly book first. No matter what, he had made a big profit this time. The heavenly book was a priceless treasure. Not to mention 5,000 spiritual jades, even 5 million spiritual jades or 50 million spiritual jades couldn't buy it. It was just that Xianxia acted too hastily just now. She might have attracted the attention of some people with ulterior motives. Li Mu looked at her and reminded her, "Next time you encounter such things, you must keep a low profile and make a fortune secretly. The fewer people who notice, the better." Xianxia nodded and said, I know. Li Mu took the book from her hand and said casually, "Oh right, teach me the dragon language when you have time." Xianxia looked at the book in his hand and gave him a meaningful look. Li Mu immediately explained, "Don't think too much. I'm not interested in the romantic history of your dragon king. I just want to learn something new. We humans have an old saying, there's no end to learning. Once I learn the dragon language, I'll be able to discover this kind of treasure the next time I encounter it." Chapter 532. After leaving the Fey Emperor's cave, Li Mu took stock of his gains. Although he had lost a lot of spirit jades, his gains were also huge. Not to mention the heavenly book, even if Li Mu couldn't comprehend it, it would still be a priceless treasure. As for the Mahist successor, it was an even bigger surprise. Even when the 100 schools of thought were flourishing, the Mahist was not unknown. Although the cultivation of the Mahist members was not high, their mechanical techniques were too powerful. Even the top forces of that time had to avoid them. Unfortunately, mechanical techniques required large amounts of precious materials and spirit jades. Not to mention small forces, even ordinary countries could not afford them. Over time, the Mahist disappeared in the long river of history. Great Zhou was strong, and with the Mahist it was like adding wings to a tiger. Li Mu was looking forward to what surprises this person would bring him. In addition, the clothes and accessories that he spent a large amount of spiritual jades on might not be worth it to others, but Li Mu bought them purely because he wanted the women around him to look good in them. He also felt that they were pleasing to the eye, so the spiritual jades he spent were not in vain. Of course, although it was not in vain, he still felt heartache. The spirit jades he had, other than his own meager salary, the Empress's reward, and the Phantom Princess's forced gift to him, were all used up. He couldn't just ask them for more. Li Mu also had a man's dignity. If they took the initiative to give it to him, then so be it. If they didn't give it to him, then Li Mu wouldn't take the initiative to ask for it. As a man, earning his own money gave him a sense of security. Leaving the 3 girls to rest on the 3rd floor, Li Mu walked down the stairs alone. Fulu Pavilion had a total of 3 floors. The 3rd floor was not open to the public. The 1st floor was for goods, and the 2nd floor was used to entertain important customers. Although there were many Fulu on the 1st floor, it couldn't satisfy everyone's needs. Some customers would ask for custom-made Fulu for special purposes. Of course, the price would be more expensive. When Li Mu walked to the 2nd floor, a Fulu school elder was receiving a middle-aged man in luxurious clothes. The middle-aged man was wearing a long robe that concealed his aura. The robe was filled with spiritual qi, and it was obvious that it was not an ordinary item. Judging from the style, it should be a product of the North sect. In the world of cultivators, those who were able to afford the ritual implements of the Northern clan were generally people with a certain amount of wealth. The middle-aged man gazed at the elder of the Talisman Amulet sect and said, "To tell you the truth, fellow Daoist Qingjingzi, I came here this time for the sake of requesting a creation talisman for my son. I only have this one son, and I hope that this talisman can protect him." Creation talisman, heaven rank Fulu. This talisman did not possess any offensive capabilities, but it could regenerate severed limbs and regenerate severed heads. Even if one's heart was crushed, it would regenerate in an extremely short period of time. Having a creation talisman was equivalent to having an extra life. Currently, in the world of cultivators, only the Fulu school was known to be able to draw a creation talisman. Qing Jingzi revealed a difficult expression. He looked at the middle-aged man and said, "Fellow Daoist Shin, you also know that the creation talisman is a heaven rank Fulu. Even in my Fulu school, only the headmaster and a few heads can draw a heaven rank Fulu. Moreover, the failure rate of a heaven rank Fulu is extremely high. Even the headmaster cannot guarantee that he will succeed." The middle-aged man said, "I am very clear about this point, or else I would not have come here. I have inquired about the rules of your school. We will prepare 10 portions of talisman liquid for the creation talisman, and we will also give you 100,000 spiritual jades as a reward." Qing Jingzi nodded and said, "There is something I have to say in advance. If the creation of the talisman fails, all the talisman liquid will be wasted. Out of the 100,000 spiritual jades, we can only return you 50,000. Although the middle-aged man felt the pinch, he also knew that in the world, only the Fulu school could draw a heaven rank Fulu. Hearing this, he nodded and said, "I understand the rules of your school. I have already prepared the talisman liquid and spiritual jades. Qing Jingzi was about to put away the spiritual jades when he heard a voice. Qing Jingzi, come here. Qing Jingzi looked back and immediately stood up. He jogged to Li Mu and said respectfully, Uncle Master, what are your orders? Li Mu brought him to the third floor and asked bluntly, is this how you treat your customers? Qing Jingzi was confused. Uncle Master, what's wrong? Li Mu said, for a creation talisman you want 10 portions of talisman liquid and 100,000 spiritual jades, and there is no guarantee of success. Do you think the reputation of the Fulu school is not collapsing fast enough? Although Li Mu was not a businessman, he knew that this was not how business was done. Taking 10 times the materials and a high deposit, and there was no guarantee of success. Even the blackest workshop was not so black-hearted. If the talisman failed this time, who would come to the Fulu school to draw talismans next time? Wasn't this chasing the customers away? This person was so generous. If he could spend 100,000 spiritual jades this time, he might spend 200,000 spiritual jades next time. This kind of high-quality customer naturally had to be kept. Xianxia, the headmaster, was already useless enough. His own grand elder's lifespan was nearing its end, and the entire school could not even gather the materials for a single heavenly secret talisman. Li Mu even had to ask for help from the Empress and Huangji. If the ancestral court of Fulu school was rich enough, why would Li Mu put down his dignity to live off a woman? Qing Jingzi did not feel anything at all. He muttered, but the rules of the school have always been like this. Li Mu did not say much to Qing Jingzi. He directly took out a sound transmission artifact and contacted Xianxia. Very quickly, Xianxia's voice sounded from the artifact. Junior brother, have you arrived at Xuanzong? Li Mu went straight to the point. I'm currently at Fulu Pavilion in Xuanzong. I have something to ask senior brother. Li Mu told Xianxia the situation. On the other side of the artifact, Xianxia said helplessly, Junior brother, you've misunderstood. It's not that we're deliberately making things difficult for customers. It's just that writing a heavenly secret Fulu is often 1 in 10. We can't guarantee success. Of course, if junior brother personally does it, it's fine even if you only take one set of materials from them. Li Mu thought for a moment and asked, if I draw it, who will the spiritual jades go to? Xianxia said, according to the rules, 20% will be handed over to the sect. As for the rest, junior brother, you can handle it yourself. Li Mu decisively put away the sound transmission artifact and said to Qing Jingzi, from now on, if anyone wants to draw a high-level Fulu, tell them to come directly to me. After saying that, he looked at the middle-aged man on the second floor and asked, who's that person? He's so generous, Qing Jingzi said. He comes from a cultivation family in Jing country. His family has a spiritual jade mine. No wonder he was so generous. So his family had a mine. Li Mu looked at the middle-aged man as if he was looking at a pile of spiritual jades. He walked to the middle-aged man's side. Qing Jingzi took the initiative to introduce him. Fellow Daoist, allow me to introduce you. This is Martial Uncle Ling Jizi. The middle-aged man immediately stood up and cupped his hands. Greetings, Senior Ling Jizi. Although the person in front of him looked young in the cultivation world, one could never estimate one's age based on appearance. Perhaps this person was already an old monster of unknown age. Li Mu smiled kindly and said, fellow Daoist, there's no need to be so formal. Sit. After the middle-aged man sat down, Li Mu asked directly, fellow Daoist, do you want a creation talisman? The middle-aged man said, yes. I'll leave this matter to your school. Li Mu waved his hand and said, there's no rush. Let's talk about the price first. The middle-aged man was stunned for a moment and muttered, didn't we already talk about the price? He complained in his heart. The price he agreed to just now was already the limit he could accept. If the Fulu school increased the price, he would have to seriously consider whether to buy it or not. Li Mu smiled and said, it's like this. Although the success rate of creating a creation talisman is not high, the grand elders of my school have returned to the sect recently. If they personally do it, they won't need 10 sets of materials. 5 sets will be enough. In addition, the Fulu school has been entrusted by you to create the talisman. If the talisman fails, it will be the responsibility of the Fulu school. The 100,000 spiritual jades will be returned to you. The middle-aged man sat in his chair, wondering if he had heard wrong. Why did the Fulu school's price get lower and lower? Not only were the materials reduced by half, But if the talisman failed, the 100,000 spiritual jades would be returned. How could there be such a good deal? Li Mu looked at him and explained, "Our Fulu school is a famous sect. We won't take advantage of you. Since the success rate of creating talismans has increased, we naturally won't charge you so much talisman liquid and spiritual jades." The middle-aged man came back to his senses and immediately said, "Oh, okay. We'll do as senior says." Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "I don't know if this fellow Daoist has any friends who need a creation talisman. After successfully creating the first Fulu, the success rate of creating the second one will increase. Therefore we can buy the second Fulu at half price. In other words, for 150,000 spiritual jades, you can buy 2 creation talismans." Although the middle-aged man didn't need it himself, if someone could buy another one he would save 25,000 spiritual jades. Thinking of this, he no longer hesitated and took out his sound transmission Immortal tool. He immediately said, "Old Ma, where are you? I have a good thing here. Quickly come to the Fulu Pavilion." In the Fulu Pavilion, 2 aristocratic family heads who had traveled thousands of miles from Jing country to Xuanzong happily gathered 10 portions of spirit liquid and 150,000 spiritual jades. They planned to buy a creation talisman each and give it to their family's younger generation to protect themselves. The Fulu school was indeed a Fulu school. They had visited all the shops here and only the Fulu school could accept the business of the heaven-grade Fulu. Li Mu personally sent the 2 big clients out and said with a smile, "Fellow Daoists, take care. In the future let's work together more often. Our sect accepts all kinds of Fulu and will give you preferential treatment. The price is negotiable." At the staircase on the 2nd floor, Qing Jingzi revealed a smile and muttered, 150,000 spiritual jades. If we give Xuanzong 45,000 spiritual jades, we'll make a net profit of 105,000. Li Mu sensed that something was wrong and asked with a frown, "Why do we have to give Xuanzong 45,000 spiritual jades?" Qing Jingzi said, "Martial uncle, don't you know? All the transactions that our 5 sects conduct here have to be given 30% to Xuanzong. This is also because the 6 sects are from the same sect, so Xuanzong gives us preferential treatment. The other small sects, aristocratic families' shops and stalls outside have to give Xuanzong 40% or even 50%. Li Mu was stunned for a moment before he strode out of the shop and said to the 2 figures who were about to disappear, "Fellow Daoists, please wait." Chapter 533. In Fulu Pavilion, the 2 family heads returned to the shop and looked nervously at the spiritual jades returned by Li Mu. They asked, "Senior, this is. If you think the price is too low we can discuss it again." Li Mu returned the spiritual jades to them and said, "This is a new rule of our Fulu school. For valuable Fulu items of the heaven realm and above, after the writing is done, you must hand over the spiritual jades and talismans. This way in a month, you can come to Great Zhou's Shindu to pick up the talismans." Hearing this, the 2 felt relieved and accepted the spiritual jades. They smiled and said, "That's good. We originally planned to go to Great Zhou's Shindu to take a look, so it's on the way." As they walked out of Fulu Pavilion, the 2 sighed in their hearts. Although they were both leaders of Dao, Xuanzong and Fulu schools' attitude towards small and medium-sized sects and families was completely different. Xuanzong was high and mighty. Their shop was opened here and every time they sold a product they had to give 40% of the income to Xuanzong. Compared to Xuanzong, Fulu school treated them especially well, living up to its name as the leader of Dao. After sending the 2 off again, Li Mu finally understood how Xuanzong's magnificent mountain gate and the spiritual jade plaza outside were built. Including the other 5 sects of Dao, the large and small sects of Zhou province, the cultivation families and countless rogue cultivators were all contributing to Xuanzong's construction. While most of the countries in Zhou province were still in a feudal society, Xuanzong had already taken a step into capitalism. He was the one who wasted his breath and the one who was tired of writing talismans. In the end he was actually working for Xuanzong. Li Mu felt a nameless anger rise in his heart. He angrily asked, "Does our Fulu school not have a mountain gate of our own? Why do we have to do business in someone else's place?" Qing Jingzi said, "This is sect master's idea. He said that White Cloud Mountain is a sacred land of the Dao sect and shouldn't do such unscrupulous things." Li Mu waved his sleeves and snapped, "Don't mention him to me. Xianxia, that prodigal son of a bitch. How many spiritual jades has he earned for others over the years? Yet he can't even gather the materials for the heavenly secret talisman. How does he still have the face to be the sect leader? Qing Jingzi silently lowered his head. He couldn't interrupt when his uncle master was scolding the sect master, and he didn't dare to interrupt. Li Mu scolded Xianxia and calmed down very quickly. It was understandable that Xuanzong would provide the platform and take a cut from the transaction. However, they were too black-hearted. 50,000 spirit jades were gone for no reason. Li Mu's heart was bleeding. He was both angry and distressed. When he walked to the first floor and saw the situation inside, he was even angrier. Although there were many customers lining up outside, there weren't many Fulu school disciples in charge of serving customers. There weren't enough people in the shop to begin with. The few disciples who were acting as temporary clerks were still gathered together and chatting happily. They ignored the customers and ignored them. A few customers came in and walked around. When they realized that there was no one to serve them, they turned around and went to other shops. Other than Fulu school, there were also people who were good at Fulu from various sects, as well as some mid-level cultivation clans. The mid-level and low-level Fulu they produced were also of good quality. People who wanted to buy Fulu might not only choose Fulu school. Most of these disciples usually cultivated in their sections. How would they know the ways of commercial service? It was unknown how many customers went to other shops because of their arrogant and rude attitude. Li Mu inadvertently glanced around and saw a familiar figure in the shop on the first floor. It was the stall owner who Li Mu had bought a large amount of clothes and accessories from. He was currently bargaining with a disciple in the shop. He looked at a Fulu and pestered the disciple, saying, "Give me a discount. 1,000 spirit jades is really too expensive. How about I buy 2 pieces and you give me a 20% discount?" The Fulu school disciple was unmoved. He said indifferently, "The Fulu's price is set by the elders. We don't accept any bargaining. If you want to buy, then buy. If you don't want to buy, then go elsewhere. There are plenty of Fulu on this street." The young man looked at the Fulu floating on the counter and hesitated for a long time. In the end, he decided to give up. Just as he was about to walk out of the shop, a voice came from behind him. "Wait." The young man turned around and saw the young man who had thrown out 20,000 spirit jades standing behind him. After being stunned for a moment, his expression suddenly changed. He said, "Don't tell me you're going back on your word. Once a product is sold, it can't be returned unless there is a problem with the quality." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "Don't worry, I'm not here to ask for a refund. Come with me." With that, he turned around and went up to the second floor. The young man hesitated for a moment but could only follow. When they reached the second floor, Li Mu sat down and said to the young man, "Sit." The young man immediately shook his head and said, "Senior, if you have something to say, I'll just stand and listen." Li Mu looked at him and asked, "What's your name?" The young man honestly replied, "I'm Ma Feng." Ma as in handsome horse, Feng as in wind. Although this person's cultivation wasn't high, he had a good business mind. Especially his mouth, it was simply like a lotus flower. If the disciples of the Fulu school were half as good as him, the Fulu in the shop would have been sold out long ago. Li Mu poured himself a cup of tea and said indifferently, "Ma Feng, that's a good name. Who is your master and which sect are you from?" Ma Feng still didn't know why this expert from the Fulu school was looking for him. He didn't dare to hide anything and continued, "Senior, I don't have a master, nor do I belong to any sect. The reason I embarked on the path of cultivation was because I found an introductory book on qi cultivation at an old bookstall when I was young. I pondered on it blindly and unintentionally walked on this path." Li Mu looked at him and suddenly asked, "Are you willing to enter my Fulu school?" Ma Feng was stunned. As a rogue cultivator, he had no sect, no background, and no one to guide him in cultivation. His biggest dream was to enter a sect, but his aptitude wasn't good. Even small sects weren't willing to accept him. Entering one of the 6 Daoist sects was something he didn't even dare to dream of. After coming back to his senses, he immediately knelt down and said loudly, "This disciple is willing." Li Mu nodded and said, "Very good. From now on, you are a disciple of the 4th generation of the Fulu school." Ma Feng immediately took off a bag from his back and placed it in front of Li Mu. He said, "These are the spiritual jades that Martial Granduncle used to buy the Immortal clothes and accessories. This disciple will return them to you." He had seen what happened in the market and guessed Li Mu's identity. He immediately changed the way he addressed him. Li Mu waved his hand and said, "These belong to you. Keep them for yourself." Ma Feng put the bag back on his back and said respectfully, "Thank you, Martial Granduncle." Li Mu said, "Get up and talk. I have some things to ask you." Ma Feng stood up from the ground and said, "Please ask, Martial Granduncle. This disciple will tell you everything he knows." Li Mu said, "If you were to manage the Fulu Pavilion, what would you do?" Ma Feng was stunned again. "Let me manage the Fulu Pavilion?" Li Mu nodded and said, "You can speak your mind boldly." Ma Feng had a thoughtful look on his face. He was not talented, short and ugly. Even those small sects didn't accept him. There must be a reason why this senior was willing to let him join one of the 6 Daoist sections. This was his chance. If he grasped it, his future cultivation path would be smooth. If he didn't, he might just be an insignificant rogue cultivator for the rest of his life. He took a deep breath and said, "Martial Granduncle, this disciple thinks that there is a big problem with the Fulu Pavilion now." Li Mu gestured to him with his hand and said, "Sit down and talk slowly." Ma Feng sat down and said boldly, "First, in the Fulu Pavilion, the attitude of the senior brothers towards the customers is too bad. We are not the only shop that sells Fulu here. Since we are the sellers, we have to prioritize the customers. Many customers are not treated in time after entering the shop, so they will go to other shops. In the middle and low-grade Fulu, the quality of our Fulu is not better than the other shops, but the price is too high and there is not much competition. This has caused a large loss of customers." Ma Feng observed Li Mu's expression as he spoke. Seeing that he was not angry because of these words, he continued to speak boldly. "Second, the selling method in the shop is too rigid. 1 Fulu is 100 spirit jades, 2 Fulu is 200 spirit jades, 10 Fulu is 1000 spirit jades. There is no discount at all, so it is difficult to stimulate the customer's desire to buy. We should set up a variety of selling methods. For example, in the shop, if you spend 500 spirit jades, 50 spirit jades, 1000 spirit jades, 150 spirit jades. If you buy 2 earth-grade Fulu, you will get 1 earth-grade Fulu for free." Li Mu nodded and said, "Well said, continue." Although he understood these things with his identity, it was not suitable for him to get involved in these trivial matters. He needed a capable assistant, and the young man in front of him was obviously the best candidate. His appearance was not impressive, but he was extremely business-minded. After receiving Li Mu's affirmation, Ma Feng became bolder and said, "The exchange in Xuanzong is only held once every 5 years, and it takes a large amount of our spirit jades. Why don't we set up shops in the sect or even in the various prefectures of the Great Zhou, or in the various countries of the Zhou province? With the reputation of our Fulu school, business will definitely be 10 or 100 times better than it is now. At this exchange, loose cultivators and cultivation clans from all over the world will gather here. This is a great opportunity for us. We must let the Fulu Pavilion leave a good impression in their hearts." As Ma Feng spoke, he was no longer limited to the Fulu Pavilion, but looked at the entire Zhou province. He planned a path of continuous development for the Fulu school. 2 hours later, he was still talking non-stop. Xuanzong's location is not good. They are located in the easternmost part of the Zhou province. Many cultivators have to travel thousands of li to get here, and the divine capital of the Great Zhou is in the center of the Zhou province. If we can build a market like this in the divine capital of the Great Zhou and invite the various sects and cultivation clans to move in, we will only take 10% of the spirit jades. This will definitely attract everyone. Unfortunately, this will offend Xuanzong and the Great Zhou court may not agree. Although Li Mu also wanted to do this and this would bring in a large amount of tax for the court, there was no doubt that this would cause Xuanzong to have no business at all. Offending the number 1 sect of Taoism, the strongest power in the Zhou province, was clearly not a good choice at the moment. We'll talk about this later. Li Mu stood up and gently patted Ma Feng's shoulder. "From now on, I'll leave the Fulu Pavilion to you." Chapter 534. Fulu Pavilion. Li Mu brought Ma Feng in front of Qing Jingzi and said, "This is Ma Feng, a new 4th-generation disciple." Ma Feng hurriedly bowed to Qing Jingzi and said, "Greetings, martial uncle." Now was not the time for the sect to recruit disciples, but the head martial uncle and martial uncle all had special privileges. Qing Jingzi was just surprised. This person's appearance was ordinary and could even be called ugly. His cultivation was pitifully low. Why did martial uncle make an exception and let him in? Thinking back to when he entered the sect, he had passed many trials and eliminated many opponents before successfully becoming a disciple of Fu Lu school. Li Mu continued to say to Qing Jingzi, "From now on, Ma Feng is the shopkeeper of Fu Lu Pavilion. You will assist him in managing Fu Lu Pavilion. The two of you will discuss the matters of the pavilion. If there is anything you cannot decide, then come find me." Qing Jingzi's face was filled with shock. He could not believe his ears. A new fourth-generation disciple had instantly replaced his position to become the manager of the Talisman Pavilion, and this caused him to be unable to accept it for a moment. But he couldn't disobey the orders of his martial uncle, so even if he was displeased in his heart, he could only nod and say, "Yes, martial uncle." Ma Feng took a deep breath and puffed out his chest. He said solemnly to Li Mu, "Disciple will do his best to not disappoint martial uncle." Qing Jingzi looked at Ma Feng with an unperturbed gaze. He wanted to see what ability this person had to be valued so highly by martial uncle. Even if he was dissatisfied, he still followed Li Mu's orders and cooperated with this person's actions. Ma Feng first found over 10 young and beautiful female cultivators in the market, and he used them to replace the few Talisman sect disciples in the pavilion before receiving the guests that came to the Talisman Pavilion. Moreover, he promised them that he would pay them 10 spirit jades every day, and they would receive a commission of 1 spirit jade for every 100 spirit jades they sold. He called these female cultivators to the second floor and spent an entire 2 hours teaching them how to attract customers and how to promote the goods in the pavilion. He also made a decision on his own. If a customer bought 2 Earth Rank Fulu tickets, they would get a Mystic Rank Fulu ticket. If a customer spent 500 Fulu tickets, they would get a discount of 50 Fulu tickets. If a customer spent 1,000 Fulu tickets, they would get a discount of 150 Fulu tickets. Qing Jingzi wanted to stop Ma Feng several times, but seeing that Li Mu did not say anything, he forcefully suppressed this thought. He and the Fulu school disciple who had been replaced stood to the side and watched coldly. When this person's various mischievous actions ruined the Fulu Pavilion's business, martial uncle knew exactly what this person was capable of. Xuanzong's Daoist Exchange Conference or Trade Conference was held every 5 years and lasted for a month. It was a grand event in the cultivation world of the Zhou continent. During the conference, cultivators from all over the Zhou continent would travel thousands of miles to Xuanzong in the East Sea. Most of them were here to exchange for suitable cultivation resources. In the market, several men were walking together. One of them said, "Which one of you will come with me to the Fulu Pavilion? I want to buy some offensive Fulu tickets for self-defense." Someone beside him said, "If you want to buy low-rank Fulu tickets, don't go to the Fulu Pavilion. It's the same in other shops." The man asked in confusion, "Why? Shouldn't the Fulu school's Fulu tickets be the best?" The man said, "Low-rank Fulu tickets are not difficult. If Fulu school can draw them, other small sects and families can draw them too. There is no difference in effectiveness. Fulu school's tickets are more expensive. Moreover, the Fulu Pavilion's disciples are all arrogant. They don't even look us in the eye. If we enter the shop, no one will pay attention to us." After this person spoke, he immediately received the agreement of the people beside him. Brother Su is right. 5 years ago I went to the Fulu Pavilion once. The disciples of these large sects are indeed very arrogant. I know of a small sect that also specializes in Fulu tickets. Their prices are much lower than the Fulu schools. Last time I bought one from them. In these 5 years, those Fulu tickets have allowed me to escape death several times. I strongly recommend you go to that shop. Alright then. If I can save some spirit jades, I also want to buy a magic tool. Just as the group was about to walk past the Fulu Pavilion, 2 beautiful female cultivators suddenly came up to them. They smiled and said, "Fellow Daoists, what do you want to buy? Our Fulu Pavilion has an event today. If you spend 500 spirit jades in the pavilion, you can return 50 spirit jades. If you spend 1,000 spirit jades, you can return 150 spirit jades." The smiles on the faces of the 2 female cultivators were extremely gentle and beautiful. The business of the Fulu Pavilion was closely related to their remuneration. The more customers they received, the more spirit jades they would receive. If rogue cultivators wanted to earn spirit jades to cultivate, they would have to risk their lives every time. How could it be as simple as this? In order to attract customers, they used almost all of their skills. The male cultivators originally didn't plan to come to the Fulu Pavilion, but they couldn't resist the enthusiasm of the two beautiful female cultivators and entered the shop with some reluctance. The situation inside the Fulu Pavilion was completely different from the last time they came. There were no longer stiff faces of the disciples of the Fulu school. Instead, there were beautiful female cultivators with sweet smiles. The two female cultivators first brought them to a resting area with tables and chairs. They poured tea for them and then asked with a smile, "Fellow Daoists, what kind of Fulu do you need? Do you need me to introduce it to you?" Sitting on comfortable soft stools and tasting fragrant tea, the male cultivators felt embarrassed even if they wanted to leave. One of the male cultivators' throat moved and he said, "I need some profound rank offensive Fulu." One of the female cultivators smiled and said, "Profound rank offensive Fulu. I recommend the Guiding Lightning Talisman, Fire Snake Talisman and Icicle Talisman. The Guiding Lightning Talisman has a sale today. Buy one and get one free. The Fire Snake Talisman and Icicle Talisman can participate in the full discount." The man's companion tugged at his sleeve and said, "Buy one Lightning Talisman and get one free. This is much more cost-effective than other shops. I've used this talisman to kill several enemies." "You'd better buy more," the male cultivator immediately said. "Then I want 5 Guiding Lightning Talismans." The female cultivator smiled and said, "Do you also need other Fulu? For example, the Divine Travel Talisman or something like that?" The male cultivator shook his head and said, "No need. I don't travel often. I don't need the Divine Travel Talisman." The beautiful female cultivator said, "The Divine Travel Talisman is not only useful for traveling. When you encounter a strong enemy, this talisman can also save your life. Especially the high-rank Divine Travel Talisman. It can make enemies 2 realms higher than you unable to catch up." The male cultivator thought carefully and seemed to be convinced. He nodded and said, "Then give me 2 of the profound rank Divine Travel Talisman." They sat there and tasted tea. Soon the female cultivator brought them the Fulu they needed. The male cultivator paid the spiritual jades and put away the Fulu. He said to the people around him, "Do you guys want to buy any Fulu?" One of the male cultivators shook his head and said, "I want to buy a magic treasure. We'll go to the North Sex Tool Refining Pavilion later." The female cultivator's expression changed when she heard this. She said unhurriedly, "Fellow Daoist, our Fulu Pavilion also sells magic treasures. Do you want to take a look?" Although the Fulu school specialized in Fulu, there were also elders in the school who knew how to refine tools and elixirs. In the entire Fulu Pavilion, Fulu accounted for 70% of the goods, while elixirs and magic treasures accounted for 30%. The male cultivator said politely, "No need." The female cultivator did not give up. She smiled at him and said, "To be honest, if you want to buy Earth rank and Heaven rank magic treasures, I certainly recommend you to go to the North Sect. After all, the North Sect is a great tool refining sect. The quality of their high-rank magic treasures is unmatched by any other sect. However, if you want to buy low-rank magic treasures, our Fulu Pavilion is not inferior to the North Sect. Moreover, the price is half. If you buy 1 magic treasure in the North Sect, you can buy 2 here." The male cultivator thought carefully and his expression changed. He did not go to buy Earth rank and Heaven rank magic treasures. He could not afford those magic treasures even if he sold himself. Just as they thought in terms of low-rank Fulu, some small sects' Fulu quality was not inferior to the Fulu school. As for low-rank magic treasures, the Fulu school would not be inferior to the North Sect. If it was not for the fact that magic treasures had to be produced by the North Sect, then it was not bad to use the Fulu schools. Moreover, the price was much lower than the North Sects, which made him very tempted. Originally, he could only buy 1 offensive Dharma artifact. Now he could buy another defensive Dharma artifact. This was an irresistible temptation. He quickly made a decision in his heart. He immediately stood up and said, "Please take me to see the Dharma artifact." At the staircase on the 2nd floor, Qing Jingzi and the other Fulu school disciples looked at the bustling scene on the 1st floor. Their faces were filled with shame. In just 2 hours, the shop's turnover had exceeded theirs in a day. Qing Jingzi finally understood why his uncle master wanted to use this person to replace him. He was sincerely convinced and bowed to Li Mu. "Uncle master has a good eye for people. I admire you from the bottom of my heart." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "You guys go down too. See if there's anything you need help with. Don't just stand here. Including Qing Jingzi, all the disciples went down the stairs. In just a few hours, the shop's situation changed completely. Li Mu knew that professional matters should be left to professionals. Although Qing Jingzi and the other Fulu school disciples were talented and had high cultivation, they were not suitable to sell goods. In terms of business in the cultivation world, the Talisman Charm sect was blessed by the heavens. As one of the 6 sects of Dao, it was a famous brand that had existed for thousands of years. Just its signboard alone was able to attract many customers. If it were to carry out some appropriate marketing methods and bring in some service and sales talents, then the Talisman Pavilion would simply become a large-scale spirit jade machine. Many businesses in the cultivation world were profitable. Not only Fulu School but also Danding sect, the North and South sects, large and small sects and aristocratic families. The cost of 10 pieces of spirit jade would be sold at least 100 pieces of spirit jade. With a little promotion, buy one get one discount, it would immediately become the conscience of the industry. But the spirit jade would be split with Xuanzong. The better the shop's business, the more Li Mu's heart would ache. But there was no other way. Although Li Mu also wanted to move the shop back to the sect and not give Xuanzong a chance to exploit it, before that he had to make Fulu Pavilion famous. Xuanzong had his eyes on Fulu School's spirit jade, while Li Mu had his eyes on their influence. In the current cultivation world, only Xuanzong could gather so many cultivators in one place. Li Mu's purpose on this trip was to help Wan Wan untie the knot in her heart. He interfered in Fulu Pavilion's business, but he really couldn't stand by and watch. The higher-ups of Fulu School all had profound cultivation and looked down on merchants. But they never thought that without spirit jade, how could low-level disciples improve their cultivation? Without talisman liquid and spiritual medicine reserves, the elders of the sect were about to die. They could only watch helplessly. After all, they were also part of Fulu School. There were some things that Xianxia didn't have to worry about, but Li Mu had to worry about him. Fulu Pavilion's business was on the right track for the time being, so Li Mu didn't have to worry too much. He came to Fulu Pavilion's 3rd floor. Wan Wan and Xiao Bai were playing flying chess and Xianxia was watching from the side. Li Mu looked at Xianxia from afar and said, "Xianxia, come to my room for a moment."